From the Israel Sports Radio studios in Jerusalem, Israel, our nation's capital, it's Louis Live! Now your host, me, and Joe Robbins. How you doing, Joe?
I'm great, Ari. Great to be back here in Jerusalem, live in studio.
Absolutely. You're listening to Louis Live on IsraelSportsRadio.com, and you can catch us also on Justin TV. So hopefully everyone is tuned in. I'm with Joe Robbins from O&G Poetry. Joe, is a short visit. I just found out that you were in the country on Fridays. I told you in the green room, so you're here until not too much longer.
Yeah, just till Monday. Whirlwind trip, but worth it to come to Israel and be in the Holy Land. There's nothing better, even if it's just for a few days. So great to be here.
We think you have real courage, and I don't know what the nice way to say is. Maybe the Jewish word for, the cojones to come back after the 49ers lost.
Yeah, that was a tough loss. We had some good talks about the playoffs when I was in studio for those 2 weeks here. Tough loss, tough end of the game, but they showed up in the game. It was a great Super Bowl, and now I'm excited for next year. I don't think it'll be a rematch of the Harbaugh Bowl. Ravens are looking thin, but right now I'm not worried about any other team. Just happy with the moves the Niners have made and will continue to make in the draft, and looking forward to next year. It was a tough loss, but all the other Bay Area sports are still doing well, so focusing on those right now.
One of the best years for Bay Area sports in a long time. You had the Giants off their World Series championship. A's had a run in the postseason. You had 49ers making it to the Super Bowl. Warriors playing great. So it is a good time to be a Bay Area fan. And of the Super Bowl, we'll get more into this with Deep Voice Brian. Will be coming on the program later on. But of the two teams, I'm sure most people would say the 49ers obviously have the better chance to go back to the Super Bowl than Baltimore.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. The Niners coming back were expected to be one of the top teams in the NFL, and they definitely were. And despite the quarterback switch and all of that, they made it to the Super Bowl. And Kaepernick seems to be the future, the answer at quarterback. And with the moves they've made, still having the most draft picks in this draft out of any team in the NFL.
Wow, great point.
Which is incredible. What Trent Baalke has done as GM, and then on the flip side, the team that's the second favorite to win the Super Bowl right now that Vegas is giving the odds to is the Seattle Seahawks. So the Niners rival and within the same division. So I think everybody's expecting that they'll be there at the end of the season, both the Niners and the Seahawks, but it'll be interesting to see. There could potentially be there's a very real chance of there being an NFC title game matchup of
between two NFC
teams
West
from
teams.
the same division.
Which doesn't sit well for me as a Cardinals fan, but hey, nothing really sat well for about 20 years outside of that. So we'll get into a lot of different things in sports. NFL draft around the horizon, fresh off the end of the college basketball season with Louisville being crowned champion. Rick Pitino, the first coach in college basketball history, to my understanding, to win a title with two different teams. So it just shows you more of his Hall of Fame status. And we'll also get into the start of the baseball season, which started, it's now a week and a half old, and we'll get some predictions of who's going to the World Series. I think Joe's pretty happy with California teams. I have a funny feeling in the moves they made. So today's show, we're going to have a little bit of everything. We'll try to cover NHL with Daniel Friedman, our NHL insider, at 8:30. At 9 p.m., we'll have Deep Voice, who will gloat to you about Baltimore being victorious. At 9:30 p.m., we'll have Brin-Jonathan Butler. And we were talking about this in the green room. Guillermo Redondo has a huge, huge fight against Donaire this Saturday night. Guillermo is a champion. He's on the map. He's a gold medal winner. He gets this victory. He goes to superstar status. Many people will consider him top 3 pound for pound at bare minimum. So that we'll get in with Brin. We are hoping to have a guest at 8 o'clock. But right now, we'll go out to a friend, and I will do a little bit of teasing. By the way, Joe, where did you end up in the March Madness pool?
I did not fare so well. I was doing great until last Friday. I had Kansas winning it all. And my Final Four was Kansas, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Marquette. So by Motzei Shabbos, by Saturday night, I went from first place in the league with 169 possible points to out of the league with 51 total and possible points. So it was a rough 25 hours for me. Great Shabbos, but when I logged back on afterwards, I was done.
All right, and on the line right now, the man who finished 15th, 16th place in the Israel Sports Radio poll, kind of lost track past 10. It was kind of fuzzy at that point, but here he is, Andy Gershman. Andy, how you doing?
I finished first. What are you talking about?
Yeah. What are you, a New Yorker, making stuff up? That's it was a tough situation for you. Your son.
I took UConn.
You picked UConn? Oh, very funny. By the way, Gino has his 8th title. I mean, we're talking about a Phil Jackson type of coach now, right?
Definitely.
No.
He's not Phil Jackson. He coached the greatest player of all times, Diana Taurasi, and Sue Bird, and he had a winning streak.
He made it very clear that he does not want to be compared. He actually, they asked him about, they compared him to Wooden, of course, who has 10. And he said very clearly that he does not want to be compared to coaches who coach men. That he doesn't coach men. He coaches women, and it's a different game. So he wanted to be compared to Pat Summitt, who, of course, he tied with 8 titles.
Wow, he is great coach, and he's humble. That's a winning combination right there.
He's not humble.
You know what? He has the record. He broke John Wooden's record for wins in a row. What did he get to 90 or something? And the president called him. So you got to respect the president there. And there you go. Right at his press conference, he called to congratulate him. Just goes to show you that it is a real sport at the end of the day.
I feel so.
Now, let's get a recap of the Final Four. I know that it's 3 days ago in the sports fans' mind. Sometimes that's ancient history. But I don't know. This tournament didn't have a lot of upset. You had Florida Gulf Coast as a 15 seed knocking it down Georgetown, going to the Sweet 16. You had a couple others, Wichita State, a number 9 in the Final Four. Overall, at the end of the day was chalk. And, Andy, we talked about this. I want to get Joe's thoughts on this as well. At the end of the day, you want to see a Duke or a Louisville or a Kentucky in the title game pretty much. Let's go with Joe first. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's great to see those teams come in. And if a team like NC State under Jim Valvano, upsetting Phi Slamma Jamma Houston when they were the top team, if that can happen, that's incredible. But that's most likely not going to happen where they're going to run all the way through and win the title. So I think it's great to have upsets along the way, but I agree. You want at least one of those two teams. Duke, UNC, Michigan State, Louisville. This year, obviously, we had both of those. But one of those teams who's been there before can be there every year to really give a great game. And one of the amazing things we've seen lately with the parity in college basketball a few years ago when we had that fabulous Duke-Butler game, that's Duke, Coach K, the old guard, just as good as ever, against a new upstart mid-major who's now become a Big Six team because of what they've done. So I think it's great to have those teams. It's great to have VCU in it every year, Gonzaga in it every year, and see what new teams come up like those teams. But you definitely want at least one chalk team in it. You want a team who you expect to be there, who will put on that show.
All right, and 10th place to Andy Gershman. What are your thoughts? You want to see the old guard or you want some upsets?
No, I think in the end you want to see the power conferences. The funny thing is, Michigan came in with a 4. But I mean, Michigan was the number 1 team throughout, at different points in the year. It wasn't not a long time, but when they went through that cycle where like 6 teams were number 1 there in like a 2-week span, they were one of the number 1 teams. So it's not, such a surprise. I mean, Wichita State even was a 15, ranked 15th at one point. But I think in the end, you want to see the best basketball. Florida Gulf Coast, great story. Like, in the end, I'm not sure I want to see Florida Gulf Coast. And anyone who's surprised that Florida Gulf Coast upset Georgetown, hasn't watched Georgetown in the NCAA tournament.
I had Georgetown losing in the second round, by the way. Just point that out.
That Florida Gulf Coast, beat University of Miami earlier in the year.
Right.
Already. So it wasn't, such a shock. I mean, obviously they were 15. But I thought the tournament was, was decent. I still don't like that play-in 11 seed thing. I think that's unfair to those schools, considering you have some decent schools who have had decent years playing in for an 11 seed. Why don't they take the lousy schools and have them play in, and instead of an 11 seed play in? I'm not a fan of that.
The idea behind the play-in game, where they would want to tell you, is year after year they used to say, this team should have gotten in, this team should have gotten in. They added a couple of teams to try to nullify those responses, but you still have the 70th team that says, I really deserve to get in. But I want to go change a tad topic. This is something me and Andy discussed a little while ago, and we'll get Joe's thoughts on this. The playoff system, this playoff format, that at the end of the day, you have a team like Indiana, number one for most of the year. They lose early, at least where they were expecting. Is their season worse than Wichita State, who got to the Final Four? I think we all agree Indiana is a better team. They have better players. If they play Wichita State 10 times, probably win at least 7. So let's go to Joe first now. March Madness, you might like it, might be entertaining. Is it fair? Your thoughts?
I think it's fair. I don't think it's a disappointment for Indiana. Obviously, it's a disappointment because they were the number one ranked team. It's disappointing for the players and for Tom Crean to not win it. But we know it's such a wild thing getting into the tournament, and upsets happen and anyone can win. I don't think they can view it as a disappointment as long as they're not bounced in the first 2 rounds. Gonzaga losing, definitely a disappointment, and losing to Wichita State.
You could say Georgetown, a 2 seed.
Georgetown
was
a disappointment. Syracuse, with some of their struggles the past couple of years. Obviously, this year they made a run. So if I had to pick the 2, I would say it's a great season for Wichita State, and for them, a team like that coming into the tournament, getting to show their worth. Like Andy said, Wichita State was ranked. They were going back and forth with Creighton for the top of their conference. So they were a ranked team. They were good, but coming in, doing what they did, making the Final Four, first time since the 60s, and the lowest seed, and all of that, all of those things that went into Wichita State's run. I think March Madness lifts them up more than it brings Indiana down. But I do think it's fair because they do the seeding on the S curve. Obviously, it gets screwed up sometimes. Oregon being a 12 was a travesty, and it knocked some teams out of the tournament that deserved to be there. Great St. Louis squad. Now people can come back and say St. Louis lost to Oregon. They didn't deserve to be there. But they also weren't facing a number 12 squad. Oregon should have been maybe a 7 at the lowest.
Right. That's a problem when people say, well, it doesn't matter how we seed them because they like to say we're proven right because of what happens. But if you seed a team incorrectly or unfairly, then it does have an effect, and it isn't correct. Andy, your thoughts? We were talking about college football. People don't like the ending. Go ahead.
Right. My thoughts are that, you have a 68-team field. Now, one of the bigger complaints that we've seen in the NBA this year, it happened earlier with San Antonio where they sat, Parker and and they sat the whole team and Duncan, and now you see it with Miami sitting, their big 3. You've seen Doc Rivers, used to do it with their big 3. Is that what incentive does a team have to play for number 1? And I know that sounds crazy, but, you always hear about, you got a schedule, your out-of-conference schedule, you got these tournaments, you got, all this stuff, where really you just have to be one of the top 68 teams.
Right.
So I don't think it's a matter of fair or not. I just think that, a team, and you could have, I mean, look, Louisville ended up running the table, obviously, to win. But that bracket, with Louisville and Duke, and I believe, right? Duke was their number 2 in that.
Yeah, they were 2. Right. They played in the Elite Eight.
That was a incredibly difficult
bracket for whoever got out of there.
Right, a region. And so I think that, it's really interesting to see because you have this argument over college football, that everyone wants a 14 playoff, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think what we all know is that, college football week to week matters. College basketball week to week really doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't,
It's proven that it doesn't matter through the tournament. I think that, just so you're one of the, like I said, top 68, and that's all that matters. Joe, I wanted to ask you a question real quick, though, speaking of the tournament. What do you think about all this fallout over Arizona?
I knew that was coming up.
Speaking about the Pac-12 referee situation, or?
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, the bounty, basically.
Yeah, so that was crazy. Head of Pac-12 officials, Ed Rush, former NBA official for years, heading into the Pac-12 tournament, which was important for deciding the seeding and to win the conference championship, tournament championship. He had a meeting with officials the day before the semifinal game between UCLA and Arizona, and he said he would give a trip to Cancun and $5,000 to anybody who gave Arizona coach Sean Miller a technical foul. And then, sure enough, during the game, Sean Miller received a technical foul at a crucial point in the game. It was a 4-point difference. Technical foul in college, obviously, is
2 free throws.
2 free throws and
the
ball. It changed the game. UCLA ended up winning by 4 points. Would they have won anyway? Maybe, but it was a huge call. The whole controversy came out, and Larry Scott, who is recognized and was officially recognized with the award the past couple of years, but as the best commissioner in college sports, he said it wasn't a fireable offense, and then this week Rush came out and resigned, and Larry Scott was on Scott Van Pelt on the radio show, and Van Pelt said, he asked Larry Scott point blank, he said, if you are an Arizona fan, how can you watch a single college basketball game next season and believe you're getting a fair deal? And all the other people were weighing in. Tim Donaghy, the disgraced NBA official who threw games and was betting on games, he came out talking about how Ed Rush had been a bully when he was in the NBA and no one liked him. And I think this is the one time people believed Donaghy. So, yeah, that was crazy scandal and unfortunate, but I'm glad it got resolved. I'm glad that Ed Rush resigned. I don't know him personally. I don't think anyone really knew about him until this happened in the Pac-12 anyway, but he needed to go, so this was definitely the right thing.
Yeah, but the problem is that Arizona, by the way, I was a loyal Arizona guy, even though I never went there, but I had him in the Final Four. Oops, that was a mistake. Hold on. That's not what I wanted. Hold on 1 second as we enjoy this music. Okay. Anyway, apologize for that. That's not so professional. I'm sorry. Anyways, I had Arizona in the Final Four. Joe had him losing to Ohio State. I wrote to Andy on chat. I said, if Arizona wins tonight against Ohio State, I win the bracket. And then I would win anyway. But then Andy wrote to the fact that if his grandmother, blah, 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 she would be his grandfather. So you two did not have faith. And in the end, a buzzer beater shot beat Arizona. But if Arizona was a higher seed, and had they won the Pac-12, they would have been, who knows what would happen? Could be Elite Eight, could be Final Four. It's frustrating. You don't know what happened.
Definitely, and I think, Larry Scott gave his comment, one of the comments he made when he had his press conference announcing the whole thing. He said Sean Miller wasn't the only one to get a technical foul. Ben Howland also got a technical foul, which is definitely true. Former UCLA coach. He was fired after they were bounced from the tournament. Former UCLA coach Ben Howland got a technical foul, but Ben Howland actually took off his suit jacket and threw it into the stands, a la Nick Nolte kicking the basketball in blue chips. So comparing the two, yes, Ben Howland got a technical foul, but he threw clothing at the fans in the stands. It's a little different than Sean Miller saying he touched the ball on a double dribble call that shouldn't have been.
I want to go now. Let's switch gears. We'll stay in college basketball. Let's talk about, of course, we have to talk about this. It was one of the biggest stories in the entire tournament, the Kevin Ware injury. First of all, when you see it, the only thing I think that's comparable that I can imagine on television is the Joe Theismann injury. But are there other injuries maybe we're forgetting live on TV during the game that were that bad? Let's go Andy first this time. Of course, Andy personally knows an ACL tear is not a lot of fun to deal with. Is there any other sport injuries we're missing that are comparable to Kevin Ware?
Not really comparable, but I mean, there's been injuries where you've seen it and you're like, oh my, like I mean, the one that popped out, two that popped out to me. One we were together for was
you're Foreman
when he buckled his knee in the
fight
fight
against Cotto, yeah.
Or title defense fight. And the other would have to be, I guess, Willis McGahee.
Good point. Right.
Against Ohio State, I guess, wasn't it?
It
was in the national championship.
In Arizona.
Miami, Ohio State. Yeah.
Well, I mean, those two are the two that stick out where you're like, oh, God. You know, when you see it. The crazy thing is, I mean, see, and I didn't have the blessing of seeing it until later. I was driving around, and, you know, when you're driving and they're talking about it on the radio, you're like, what happened exactly? And even when you see it, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it was just so bizarre. You just kind of went flying over, and, you know, it seemed pretty routine until his, you know, tibia shot out of his leg.
I still don't understand how it happened. That's the thing. Most injuries usually are contact with another human being. He just touched the floor.
Right. And
that video.
The angle. I mean, I guess it was just the angle he came down at. You know, it kind of just snapped it.
The reaction of the bench, that's something I've never seen, where there are a couple of guys, we were told, vomited on the spot. You see one guy very clearly covering his mouth. Patino said he felt like vomiting when he looked at that. And the game in itself, you know, Kevin Ware's not a star. I don't see Kevin Ware going to the NBA or anything. But they did say that Kevin Ware was critical in saying, win this for us. The game was close. And then they eventually took over and beat Duke. What's that like? I mean, from Coach K's perspective, you know, let's go to Joe on this. He's got to talk to his teammates and say, don't feel bad for them. You got to go for the jugular. How does he do that? They didn't get it done, but what did he say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely one of the challenges. And one thing that I want to say about Coach K is right when it happened, Coach K went over after they took Ware off and comforted Rick Pitino. And that just shows we've all known forever that Coach K was one of the classiest guys in college basketball, if not the classiest. He was there, and yeah, I mean, he has to tell his players who were celebrating hitting that three-point shot and then look down, how did they get back in the game? So yeah, I mean, such a tough spot to be in for any coach, but I think if anyone can handle it, it was Coach K. I think that Duke was overmatched anyway, and they would have lost that game without the Kevin Ware inspiration for Louisville. But yeah, that was a freak injury. I think the one distinction that needs to be made, and I put this right on the level of Theismann also. When I was telling my dad about it, I was getting the play-by-play updates because I didn't see it live either, but I started following it right after, and they weren't showing the replay. There was just him on the ground and everyone crying and all of that. My dad said it sounds like Joe Theismann. And I think the one distinction that needs to be made is the broadcasters called it one of the worst injuries in sports history. Well, we know multiple players have been paralyzed on the field.
That's right.
Javid Best is, with his concussions at Cal, and he's been out of the NFL for the past 2 years as a result of one concussion he suffered.
Sugar Ray Robinson killed someone in the ring. I know they don't have video of it,
Right.
but he did do it.
Right.
Max Baer also killed someone in the ring.
Exactly. So I think, obviously this was a terrible injury. I think it's an important distinction to make when the announcers say this is the worst sports injury ever. There was also the guy on the Houston Oilers at the time who had a heart attack on the field, the only player in NFL history to die on the field during a game. So
You have Bird from the Jets, his own teammate hit him, and he was paralyzed.
Quadriplegic.
Right. And you have Tony Caniglia of the Red Sox, who was hit in the head with a ball and died later that day, I believe.
Well, those were two other baseball injuries. The two baseball injuries I wanted to bring up was Adam Greenberg, member of the Tribe, got hit in the head. People that comment on the video, the teammates said they thought he died because they said the look and everything, that's what it felt like. It seemed like, thank God he didn't, and he did get another at-bat in Major League Baseball. Also one that was very famous, although it wasn't a long-term injury, but he did sustain a concussion, Mike Piazza being beaned by the bully Roger Clemens. In the interleague game, regular season 2000, it was something else. Go ahead, Andy.
Wait, well, let me ask you this. Speaking of sports injuries, and this is just my own hang-up, and I can't even explain why it just bothers me. When are we going to see a time when an NCAA basketball player falls off the court?
That is, Andy, I'm with you. That is my biggest thing. Those recessed floors.
I don't get it.
It's so stupid. And the coaches talk about, they can't say very much because they don't want to be fined,
yeah.
But they don't like it. It makes no sense having the players down. And you see the players don't even take advantage of it because, they have no reason to, but they have their feet up on the side. So they don't even have their feet down in it because it's unnatural. The worst in the country is definitely Vanderbilt. The Commodores have it so deep on both sides that their benches are actually under the baseline, which makes no sense at all. Like, why would you have to change basketball just to put in space you're not even using? But I will say this about it, because that was something I noticed during the game also, and I said to my friend who I was talking about while we were watching the aftermath, I said when the first reports came out that the Louisville players were vomiting, I said, thank God this was the underground floor. That's the one good time, because otherwise they would have been puking all over the court. So that's like the only time that it was good having a dugout.
When they come off the court, they're like crawling down to the bench.
Yeah, I don't know why it started or when. I feel like it was within the last 5 years. I don't remember it before
I think it's
then.
because they moved into these mega domes.
Right, that's about to say. Were these huge games.
So they're like creating a basketball environment.
Yeah, basically, like, for example, you have a lot of times they're in football stadiums. Like when they're in Indianapolis, they play where the Colts play, so they want to put 75,000 people in there.
Lucas Oil Field.
They put a basketball court. It's they say it's awkward for them. You're right. You figured these kids are making other people billions of dollars. Safety should be somewhat insured, or, insured. You would think about that.
Yeah.
These are student athletes on scholarships.
Well, that goes into our next topic, and this somewhat ties in. I'm going to we'll continue with this, but I want to do a little bit of a slant. Let's talk about the Rutgers incident. Rutgers head coach was fired. Videos of him throwing basketballs hard at his players, shoving them, kicking them. I've had a basketball thrown in my head even lightly and made me very mad. I took revenge 2 years later. I do not like it, and it's very demeaning. Now that this coach doing this, he's doing it as a coach. If he would have done that on a street ball court, he would have got his ass kicked, but he's doing it in an authoritative position. So first, I want to talk about how disgusting it is what he did, and let's go to Joe first on that.
Yeah, definitely. Just speaking to the position of power that you were talking about, if you are a teacher, a coach, anything like that position of power is automatically there, whether you try and take advantage of it or not. So you see the college students in that video, they've got their heads down, they're completely emasculated. It's like he's beating a puppy or something.
Right.
And these are huge grown men, but at the same time, having said that they're huge grown men, they're still young, and this is
vulnerable.
Mentally traumatizing, definitely vulnerable. It was definitely despicable behavior.
What you talked about was right on. They look like, oh, I'm sorry, coach, I let you down. Thank you for hitting me in the head with the ball. I deserved it.
They look like they're back as 5-year-olds and they should be facing the corner or something. I mean, that's what it looked like. And so I when you hear Mike Rice talk and people say, oh, he was only remorseful so he can get another job, that interview outside of his house, I do believe he really was remorseful. I don't think he's a monster, but what he did, he was a monster during those practices, and he went to the anger management courses. Hopefully those helped, who knows, but yeah, he definitely needed to be fired, no question. Athletic director needed to lose his job. I think the president of the university should have lost his job, because how do you not take the time to look at a 3-minute video when you're fining a coach $75,000 and suspending him for 3 games? But the fallout for now seems to be over. Chris Christie came out in support of the president of the university and said he understood. So it sounds like his job is safe. But yeah, that was a terrible incident. Bad for the sport, and really for any sports. You read about stories like this in Little League sometimes, where the coaches or the team, the parents of the rival team get arrested, and because it's children, they get arrested, and this is on that level. So I think it's good that it got the attention it deserved finally. But yeah, just despicable behavior by a coach who's supposed to be a role model and guiding these students.
Before I go to Andy with a question, I just want to say, in regards to anger management, fellas, it doesn't really work. I just tell you, it's just a waste of time. Not that I know from personal experience. But anyway, Andy, Bobby Knight never threw a basketball at a player, right?
He just choked somebody.
He just choked someone, that was it. So, no, another coach has done it.
He's become the lovable grandpa. And I can tell you, I mean, look, I think we all know throughout the history of sports, there's psychotic coaches. And even, I know from, my limited experience playing high school basketball, we were certainly yelled at, screamed at, blah, 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 blah. We never were touched physically. We never were thrown a ball at or anything like that. What I find so interesting, I mean, this is a classic case of abuse.
Yeah.
I mean, how these guys, these massive human beings, didn't turn and beat the you-know-what out of
Right.
these guys is unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, seriously, they had the power. They were strong enough, and they just went off, and they never even, never reported it, never said anything. I think, Joe touched on it with the president of the school, where I think he was supposed, I mean, what are his 2 biggest revenue generators? Have to be basketball
and football.
Your basketball coach is probably your second highest paid employee at the school. And you don't even question why he's suspended?
The president's explanation was that someone came to him and said, yeah, we suspended this guy for 3 games and fined him this. And he was like, oh, okay, well, they're taking care of it. I'm going to move on and sip my drink and, go to a coffee house and chill. And he didn't look into it, and he should have. And he joked about it. And Jay Billis brought up that point, that he was joking about it during the press conference. They asked him if he thought about resigning. He joked every day. He doesn't think it's that serious, and that's why he didn't look into it initially. Still doesn't think it's serious, didn't think it was serious then. Billis brought up the point.
What's interesting is now, I mean, first of all, a lot of those guys are now transferred. Who's going to come in there next? I mean, I've heard rumors of Howland. I've heard rumor of Eddie Jordan has basically asked for the job. I guess he's a Rutgers alum. I don't know who's going to take over. Who would be next? Somebody will take it because
it's New York.
They're going. why not, right? I
It's still New York.
It's New Jersey, but
Okay.
like to think they're New York.
That's like New York. Some people say.
They're going to the Big Ten, right? Aren't they a Big Ten school now?
Yeah, 2014 season they'll be in the Big Ten, and they said that was why the athletic director Pernetti was going to keep his job, and then they realized that he handled it so poorly that even moving to the Big Ten, which was the biggest sports achievement for the school since Greg Schiano led them in football to within a couple games of the title, that wasn't enough to keep his job. So that again shows the scope of how big and bad this was. I mean, if you've got the governor of the state weighing in,
yeah.
And it's not just any governor, it's not a governor we haven't heard of, it's presidential nominee possibly, and a governor that everyone in the country likes after Hurricane Sandy. It was bad. That's really the reason, and maybe Christie supporting him is why he has a job, but that's why I'm shocked that the president didn't lose his job.
By the way, Andy, we all know Jersey is really New York. It's New York's garbage dump. I mean, that still counts, you know? Like, if you take a garbage out somewhere, you consider it part of your property. Bill has brought right, there you go. Bill has brought up this point. Do they need in college universities a separate president, if you will? I don't know if you said co-president, but a guy just in charge of the sports department, because a lot of these presidents are...
They have that. It's called the athletic director.
Okay. Well said.
They do. They have it. I'll tell you what they need, though. They need something other than the NCAA. That's what they need.
Yeah, that would probably be good.
Governing body outside of the NCAA. That's where they're completely falling short at this point, you know, and they need to do something to create, you know, an environment where it's less corrupt and where these coaches have so much power. It's unbelievable. It was only a matter of time before something like this happened. You know, they're given this open checkbook, and you know, it's just like go wild, go crazy.
Yeah, and you make a great point. The athletic director really is supposed to be the president of the sports department, and the president overall, many times, is an academic. You know, he spent a lot of his life at university, or most of his life. He works his way up. He might not even know sports so well, but he should have common sense, at least in this case, to check in. Why did your guy get suspended for 3 games and a fine of $75,000? I want to go ahead.
But Ari, you have to understand that for most universities, you know, they're generating, the athletics is generating so much income for them. You know, they're not going to say anything. They
Right.
need that revenue stream.
Right. We made this joke off air that I have a funny feeling that the student athletes, as Andy likes to say, who were playing in the Final Four, I don't think they took a lot of tests that week or had to do a lot of studying. It's probably some professor said, "Don't worry, kid, you play well, and we'll call it a day and move on." Because
I mean, half of them down at the tournaments have already declared for the draft, so I'm sure they're still attending classes. But you know, the other thing that's funny is that you know, I guess the Louisville men had requested to fly down to New Orleans to support the Louisville women.
okay,
and their request was denied. And, you know, because it doesn't fall under the NCAA guidelines. They can't just take flight, you know. And so, I can't remember who it was, but they said, you know, I have an idea. How about they go to class? You know?
Right.
I mean, they've been out of school for about a month now, you know, with March Madness. Maybe they could, you know, show off in class. That, you know, just a thought.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Although, in my opinion, women's basketball, you can't take off class for that. What can you take class off for? You know what I mean? I want to stay on this topic, but switch a little bit, because the issue of the players not being paid, at least allegedly, meaning they're not supposed to be paid, I think that's what makes the Rutgers situation so bad. I also think, you know, CBS signed a $6 billion contract, I think 10 years ago. It might be up. There's all this money being generated. The players are not supposed to get paid. First, the Rutgers situation. If I was in a situation where I'm in some type of competition worth millions of dollars, and I had a coach that was physically demanding. He was physically hurting me to make sure I was prepared for that contest. I don't know if I could get so mad at that. But the Rutgers situation, he gets all the money, and so does the athletic director, and so does the president. And the guys that he's throwing balls at aren't getting any money. So with the Rutgers situation, meaning if that was in the NBA, if Phil Jackson, after a meditation, threw a basketball at Shaq's head and said, make your damn free throws, and Shaq cried about it, but then he made the free throws in the finals, is it not as bad that way? So, Joe, first of all, let's ask you, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that would be as bad, just because the main difference is they're professional athletes. Even if it's an 18 or 19-year-old professional athlete, you're on that different level. It's a job. That doesn't mean it's okay, but I think it's more tolerated. It's definitely not as bad. These are student athletes, like we said. They aren't getting compensated. They aren't ready to be berated like that, and I guarantee you on their recruitment trips and when Mike Rice went to their houses, they weren't he wasn't spewing homophobic slurs at them and hitting them in the head with their couch pillows. So I think definitely if they were getting paid, it would be different. And I agree with Andy 100%. We need something outside of the NCAA. The NCAA is so corrupt, and I'm not blaming this on the NCAA. Mike Rice clearly had the anger management, but I do agree with Andy that the NCAA has set it up so these coaches can do all of these things. How many major programs have we seen with various NCAA violations? UConn is out of the tournament for a couple years because they couldn't even find anyone smart enough to cheat for the players. We all know the players don't go to class, but how do you not find a way to get them good grades?
This is Calhoun. This is Calhoun.
I mean, keep in mind that, with the NCAA, keep in mind that he can get another job. Now, it's going to be very difficult, but he can get another job.
Right. It's not like he's banned.
And it's like, you go back to, hey, we might as well Pete Carroll, okay? I mean,
USC, yeah.
But Pete Carroll, he just says, you know what, I'm out.
See ya. Go to Seattle.
And exactly. And so I think it creates an environment. Look, the other problem is that half of these guys that sit on the NCAA committee, they're all from universities, and they've all been around universities, so they all just kind of wash each other's hands. And you need an outside organization. I heard the other day someone propose an idea of maybe 3 or 4 or 5, whatever you want, retired judges. That really,
It's not a bad idea.
Even then, I mean, it's not a bad idea, but you know what? Unfortunately, if they're a retired judge, and I know anyone's going to have this, they went to some university at some point. So there's always going to be a weak link. I don't know if you've seen the 30-30 on SMU, but I mean, it's incredible to think that SMU got the death penalty because they paid a guy $25,000, to play for them, and yet, I mean, that pales in comparison to what went on with Super Yid down in Miami. I mean, it doesn't even, Devin Shapiro, it doesn't even, compare to what was going on.
You don't think Reggie Bush got $25,000 in the year he won the Heisman? I mean, come on.
He got $25,000 the day he won the Heisman.
You know what? They took the Heisman away from Reggie Bush, but they never returned the gate money that they made off of Reggie Bush. They're never going to. And so that's why it's always kind of like, all right, so if we have to serve a year of no bowl games, so be it, I mean, SMU, it took SMU, I think in the end, it took them 23 years to return back to a bowl game from a 2-year death penalty. I mean, that's unbelievable. 23 years of just inept football and awful football. But, you look at some of these other programs that have kind of just gotten away, how Penn State didn't get the death penalty is unreal. But it's just, there's certain protection out there, and there always will be certain protection out there with them because these guys are so close to the situation. They can't remove themselves from, where they're from or where they've been. So, it's just a cycle.
It protects us. See, that's what Israel Sports Radio is all about. We used an Israeli word in college sports. That's good.
Exactly. The other thing I wanted to mention is, to Joe's point about the paying and being paid and not paid, and would it be more acceptable? I mean, you can just think about, you go into a soup kitchen as a volunteer, and as you're handing out a meal, you spill it, and everyone says, "Don't worry about it. You're here to volunteer. It's great you're here." You go in as a paid employee, and you spill stuff, and you start dropping stuff. It's a little different.
Right.
It's like everyone loves to volunteer, but as soon as you're paid, game on.
So let's actually, before we go on to the next point, I was just thinking when you talk about Coach Rice, Joe said, I don't think he used a homophobic slur. It would be funny had he walked in, his parents of a kid he's trying to recruit, and they say, why should I send my son to your school? He says, well, I'm going to make sure that he's going to grow up to be a man, and if he's not, I'll call him a sissy and throw something in his head. It's true. It'd be an interesting type of recruitment tactic. Maybe they'll do that in the future. All right, I'm at a point now.
Have you seen the Saturday Night Live skit from last Saturday?
Was that about Coach Rice? I didn't see it. I'll try to get it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was a complete spoof on it, and it is hilarious.
Okay.
I mean, it's based on a female basketball coach, but it is just hilarious. She throws a toaster at a player, and he's like, "So why did you throw the toaster?" And she says, "Because when she got beat off the dribble, she was toast." She had a toaster thrown at her. But it was so over the top, but it was hilarious. It was dead on, that's for sure.
All right, let's go to the issue of if the players should be paid officially on the books, because for about 10 or 15 years, I was always against it for a couple of reasons. One, I thought it would take kind of the love of the game out of it. I think a lot of people like college sports, at least the illusion is they're playing just for the love of the game, not for money. Two, college basketball is unique in that the stars, if you will, what draws people are not the players. The coach is the star, and then the name on the jersey draws people in. So you could, for example, this may shock you guys, but I didn't really know who was playing in the tournament, player-wise. I just knew the teams. But I was still, yeah, it might shock you guys, even though I was number one in the pool at the end of the day. But I was into the tournament. I had a good time watching it. It was very entertaining because of outside things, where they're from and the stories behind it, and they're playing kind of reminds me like, oh, when I was in high school or college, just playing for the fun of it. So that was one reason why I didn't like the idea of them getting paid. For example, as we talk about this, the NBA is a star league. I need to know the names of the players. Even if the Celtics and Lakers are playing, but there's no Kobe Bryant or Kevin Garnett or Paul Gasol, I'm not really interested. Not all sports are like that. Baseball, the Cubs and Red Sox are playing, and I don't know any players. I'm watching anyway. And college basketball is like that as well. However, that being said, at this point, because there's so much money involved, there's been for a long, long time, I think it is time the players get paid. I don't know how that would go about. Let's say in college football, you sign Johnny Manziel to a contract. He wins the Heisman. Does he hold out in the offseason? Because he says, now my value goes up. And most people will say you don't sign him to a contract, you set up a stipend. That's not really fair either, because Johnny Manziel should not be paid the same as a backup placeholder. So let's go to Joe first. If you think they should get paid or not, and if you think they should get paid, how would you set that system up?
So I've been saying for years, especially since the NBA and the NCAA colluded to do the mandatory freshman year in college before going to the NBA, or 19 years old for an international player, which I don't think is legal. I still don't understand how it can be. So what I've thought for a long time, but really intensified since then, I think there should be insurance policies for every single player. I don't think realistically that the players will ever get paid. Knowing the NCAA, knowing how it is, I don't think they'll ever get paid. But middle ground that could happen is an insurance policy. So if I'm Sean Livingston, going back to the most terrible sports injuries, that's one in basketball relating to legs. Sean Livingston, untouched, went up for a dunk. For people who aren't familiar, went up for a dunk, tore everything in his knee. nothing left. He tore ligament, cartilage, every ligament, cartilage, dislocated kneecap.
He was going to be a top 5 pick, they say, right?
Well, so he was, and he played a year in the NBA when it happened.
Okay.
But yeah, he was a top 5 pick out of high school. But if it had been 2 years later, he would have been a freshman at Duke when it happened, and his career would have been over. And so that's the whole thing. If you're going to make them go to school, take out, a $1 million insurance policy for all of them. And they've got the money, and with the amount of injuries there are, they could definitely cover it. It would have to be different. Football's another thing. But if they really are student athletes, we always hear about schools complaining that more weight needs to be put on the student part of student athletes. But for a lot of these guys, if athletics is the career that they have, weight needs to be put on the athlete part also, especially with the money it's bringing in. So I think insurance policies for the college players, they'll still try just as hard. Look at Marcus Lattimore from South Carolina. Best running back in college football, tears his right ACL, misses a season, comes back, best running back in college football. Last game of the season, horribly tears his left ACL, gonna miss another year. Now, he was a surefire top 5 pick before the injuries. He'll still go pro, assuming he can come back. Hopefully he goes high enough and is able to have a career, but who knows? He might never play in the NFL, and that injury was so bad. The day it happened, LeBron James and other people were tweeting and texting both Marcus Lattimore and getting his number to call him. So, I mean, something like that, LeBron has all his money, and this is nothing against LeBron. This isn't a LeBron bashing thing.
But had he been under this rule
exactly,
and got injured in college.
Exactly. So LeBron has all his money. He's got his hundreds of millions. Marcus Lattimore might never play football again after this second ACL. They're hoping he will, and because of his first recovery. But even if he was, there's no way he's a top 5 pick. Best scenario is he turns into Frank Gore and has a Hall of Fame career as a lower round pick because of the injuries. So I think I don't realistically think the players will ever be paid, but if there's some protection for them, some sort of insurance policy to make it a little bit more fair, for the NCAA to say, we know we're making billions a year off of you, at least here's $100,000 if you blow out your knee, something.
All right, Andy, so Joe,
let me ask you,
go ahead.
So my first question is, how much do you pay the right midfielder, whatever, lacrosse player from the University of Maryland?
Are you talking to me or Joe?
Whoever.
Well, what I'm saying is,
because you want to get paid, so you.
Well, because you wouldn't pay him that much because he's not generating that much for the university.
Oh, that's not true. Because lacrosse at the University of Maryland, thousands of people go. They're national champions. They're always in the, in the running, and they're always in the tournament. How much do you pay a Boston College hockey player?
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is the problem.
So that's your biggest issue. Here's what I think they need to do. One, they need to allow student athletes to have the same rights as non-athletes, such as they can get jobs.
Right.
They can go visit. They can do things that generate income and cut down on the corruption because they're sitting there broke. And when their college basketball coach offers them a slice of pizza, he gets, in so much trouble because he's giving them a slice of pizza.
Right.
So allow them to work. That is the first thing. The second thing that I think they need to do is they need to come up, and I know it sounds absurd, but this is my own little thing. Why not have a major? I think we've talked about this, maybe even Ari. Have a major. You can major in your sport. That
right.
way, if you don't become a professional athlete, which most of them don't, then they can at least get on the bench and they can coach and they can do other things with that because they've learned the sport from a, some sort of technical sense other than, I mean, how many communication majors can you have in an athletics department that never go to class? I mean, every single guy. I love it. I think they've even stopped. Have they stopped doing the announcing their major, and they just tell their school?
I think at this point, sometimes if they have a really good one, they might say it.
Right, exactly. There's the one guy on every team.
It was like a medical one or whatever.
Biochemical engineer or something, and he's got a 3.9. I mean, there's one of those on every team, or everyone on Duke, one of the two. So
right.
It's one of those things where I think they just need to admit what these guys are. I think the last thing they need to do is they need a system. I agree with Joe 100%. I do not understand how it is legal in this country to forbid someone to make a decision on their career after they're 18 years old. I mean, as long as they are of age to legally make their own decision, how can you stop somebody? So I think the decision needs to be sort of like they do in college baseball. If you go, you're going for 3 years. If not, you can do whatever you want. I don't understand how they can do it. I sort of understand it with football because the size difference and everything. But you know what? You have some stud, then let him go.
Yeah, I mean,
what happened?
LeBron.
Boy, that worked out well for everyone.
Well, I tell you, the 18-year-old football thing, they say the man size, they need to be a 21-year-old. The thing is, though, there might be some wide receivers at 18 that could do well or not. I think LeBron James at 18 in the NFL would have done some decent stuff. I still don't understand it. So at this point, the two answers we have for you two gentlemen, Joe would like to see an insurance policy set up for the players. Andy's of the opinion, let them major in their sport so they have a backup plan. And this is my solution, which I think is the best of the three, in my humble opinion. Now, believe it or not, people think Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were drafted in the same year because they played their first year the same year, but it's not true. Magic Johnson was drafted number 1 overall in 1979. Larry Bird was drafted in 1978 under the junior exception by the Celtics, meaning his final... The Larry Bird rule. So his final year at Indiana State, he knew after that he was going to the NBA. I would like to see, because college basketball is basically, if they make it a course, a minor league for the NBA. That's why the NBA has sucked so much the last 10 years, because these kids don't go to college, they don't learn how to play, and you have a bunch of Kwame Browns and God knows who what that just cannot play. They don't learn, they don't know how to do it. So it used to be in the 90s, when someone got drafted in the NBA, they were a player right away. Penny Hardaway and Shaq and Webber right away because they learned in college. So I would have, if there's some stud at 18 years old, and the 76ers want to waste their draft pick, or maybe not a waste of them, on him, they draft him. He goes to college, and they can pay him money, because now he's an employee of the 76ers. Just like employee of any company, a company could send their employee to college and say, if you go to college, we will pay for your college, we will give you side money, and after that you will get a raise. That's how a lot of companies do that. Why should the NBA be different? So that's what I would like to see.
I think it's completely different. I really do.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, it's completely different because, first of all, most employers who do that, they're paying for college. That's the big thing. Okay.
Right.
Well, these guys are already getting free college. Okay, that's not the issue. The issue is not paying for college. The issue is, and then what do you do? Because what do you do with a millionaire 18-year-old? Okay, so he's not going to school.
Right.
He's not going to do anything. So basically, he's just hanging out, waiting. What do? Because although it seems like these seasons go on forever, there are many months when they're not playing their sport. What does this millionaire do when he's not playing his sport?
Basically,
just hang out on the beach in Miami. I mean,
this is the way I see it. Let's use the Sixers guy. I don't know why it's in my mind. Let's say they see some high school blue chip guy.
They were the first person to draft a high school player, Moses Malone.
Okay, there you go. See, it's in my mind. There we go. So let's say they see a Moses Malone somewhere, modern day. They want to draft him. I would hope before they sign him, an 18-year-old to $1 million contract, They sit him down. They give him the Wonderlic test or whatever they want to do. They psychologically analyze him. Obviously, it's not perfect. They do the best they can. They say, here's the situation, kid. We're setting up a contract, but that's based on an attendance thing in college. We want you to study business so you don't waste your money. We want you to study this. This is what we're going to set up for you. If you're not interested in doing that, we're not going to sign you. So there could be stipulations in the contract that ensure he goes to class, ensure he has good behavior.
So why would that be legal? Honestly, I mean, if I'm hired by a company, right, to do a job, right? I mean,
right.
Yes, there could be morals clauses, but I mean, it just seems like it's backward. I mean, it's completely backward. Either draft him and have him playing for you, or put him in the D League or something like that, or he goes to college. I mean, that's where the problem is. See, in baseball, I mean, what is it? Most players, it's probably 7-8 years before they get to the major leagues because they get to the
That's right.
and everything else.
Also, their physical build is more. A baseball player thrives in his late 20s, early 30s. Physically,
right,
particularly.
Why can't you just take a basketball player and see? That's where I think they're missing it. And put him in the D League.
At 18 years old, you're saying?
Sure.
That's not a bad idea.
Well, and there have been a couple instances.
But you would
that
kill college basketball if you did that, though. Just so you know, you would kill it because now you have a second tier playing college basketball. But go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have a second tier playing college basketball, just so it's competitive.
All right, Joe, go ahead. Your thoughts, and then we got to wrap up for an excess. Go ahead, Joe.
Glenn Rice Jr., we all remember Glenn Rice, last Michigan player to win the national title, 15 years in the NBA, great career. His son was a star at Georgia Tech, got kicked off of the team for multiple suspensions, went straight to the D League. He was rated the #1 transfer prospect in college basketball that year, decided to leave college because he said, hey, I'm not in class anyway, who cares? So he didn't transfer. He went to the D League, and now they're actually saying he's going to get drafted in this year's NBA draft. Right. And if it happened...
Why not create a minor league system? I mean, I know the NCAA would fight it, but they don't care about baseball, which is interesting. And I can understand in football why you wouldn't do it, because it's the physicality of the sport. But it doesn't seem to me to make any sense why basketball, who has established a D League, wouldn't encourage that.
All right, interesting topic. Certainly be debated for a long, long time because these stories will not go away about coach abuse or people getting paid on the table. Heisman's being taken away. It will occur for a long, long time. 10th place, Andy Gershman. Thank you for being on Louis Live on Israel Sports Radio. And I will see you on Facebook pretty soon. I'm pretty confident.
Be well.
All right, be well. All right, that was Andy Gershman, author of Modern Day Maccabees. You can check out that book, Modern Day Maccabees, on Kindle as well as Amazon.com. Hour 1 in the books. We're going to stay here and not take a commercial break, because we're going to go into Israel and speak to New York Neil. But before we bring up New York Neil, Joe, just wrap up your thoughts on the college basketball season and Louisville's title victory.
Great victory for Louisville. They were a great team. They had all the talent, but you still need the chemistry, as we know. Like you mentioned before, just shows the mastery of Rick Pitino, first coach to win a title at 2 different schools. He was always one of the greatest ever. I mean, since we've known him in our lifetimes, he's been one of the greatest ever. This helps add to the legacy, which he cemented long ago. Good for them, and I'm ready for Arizona to bear down next season.
Yeah. Incredible thing is, historic as Arizona's been, in all the Final Four appearances, only 1 title, to show you how rare it is to win a title. It's very difficult. 120-plus schools. On the line right now, the man who finished second place to me in the Israel Sports Radio pool, New York Neil. New York Neil, how you doing?
Harry, I'll never admit to it, baby.
Of course, for those who don't know,
never admit to it.
At first glance, it looks like that me and Neil tied. We had the same number of points, but the tiebreaker being the score in the title game, and I just barely beat Neil pretty much. Neil had it in the 60s, I had it in the 80s, and the final score is 82-76. So I was sweating a bit after Syracuse lost, I have to tell you. But Let's move on to baseball. There are a lot of great stories, a lot of great things that occur. But before we get to that, let's talk about something that kind of sucks. A-Rod. Tell me, what do you do? What's going to happen with A-Rod? I mean, he's out middle of the season. He's apparently on the list. He did steroids again. Is there any way the Yankees could void that contract and not pay him the $30+ million that they have to pay him?
Well, let's be realistic. There is no doubt in my mind that they're going to investigate all avenues to see if they can void that contract. I mean, I'm sure that you and I would look the same way. But if they can't, they're going to obviously have to eat it, pay him, and try and get him to play. Will he be the same player? There's no way that will happen. He's been on a steady decline the last 2 years with injuries. Some people can say it's because he's gotten off the steroids, whatever they want to assume. But the bottom line is the Yankees have to prepare this season without him and not with him as part of their roster. If he comes back, hey, great. I believe personally that he won't even be a shell of himself. And listen, they're hurting all across the board with injuries right now, like many teams. But the fact is that they just need to stay in the hunt. I think the division is wide open for them, and I think it's wide open for everybody in the division. I don't think there's one standout team or a team that's going to run away with it. So if and when they get healthy, if they have a half a season of health, I think that they're going to still be a tough out. Their pitching will keep them in almost all the games the rest of the year, and their bullpen is very strong.
Let's talk about Mariano Rivera. All signs he's indicated this is going to be his last season. Tremendous the fact that he was able to come back after that season-ending injury last year. What do you expect from Mo? I mean, it was for years, almost 10 years, people kept saying he's out of gas. This has got to be his last year. And he kept putting up great season after great season. But realistically, after this injury, what are you looking to get out of Mariano Rivera?
Nothing less than what he's given us. I mean, the guy is just ageless, you know? He just continues to do what he does best, pitching in 2 games, not giving up a hit yet, not even walking about it. The guy is just incredible. He's a freak of nature. That somebody that thin, with really, other than last year's injury, can come back at 40 years of age and just be as effective, with basically one out pitch, even though he has multiple pitches. But
it's the cutter.
Yeah. It's the cutter, of course. And the bottom line is he should go out like a champion. Not that the Yankees will win it, but what I'm saying is let him go out on his terms. He's earned it. He's the greatest reliever of all time, by none. And I've had the privilege of watching his whole career and seeing an unbelievable closer.
Also, it's incredible to think that Mariano, around 26 years old, was fluttering in his career. There were talks about trades to the Tigers. He was thinking about quitting baseball, and then he developed this cutter, and the rest, they say, is history. Neil, I want to introduce you to my special guest co-host for tonight's show, Joe Robbins. Take it away, Joe.
Hey, Neil. Good to speak to you.
Hi, Joe. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Good to be here. I completely agree on Rivera. I think he is the one bright spot for the Yankees this year with all the injuries, all of that. Like you said, he's going to go out as a champion. I don't think the Yankees are going to win too many games because of the injuries, all the different things. They'll have a chance at the division. I don't think they'll have a chance at the wild card. I think the Blue Jays, once it clicks, the chemistry, the Blue Jays will come out with the division. But I think regardless of what happens with the Yankees season and with the rest of it, Mo is going to be the same old Mo. He's ageless, like you mentioned. He's going to go out on top. He's going to have a season without any drop-off and ride off into the sunset a champion. Even though it won't be this year a literal championship, he'll have his metaphoric championship, and he'll go off as the greatest closer of all time, who ended on a high note with his 40-something saves and low ERA. Maybe not that many saves depending on their wins, but he'll have a great year.
Gentlemen, I got to know this. Apparently, when he goes from stadium to stadium, even though he's coming in the 9th inning to try to finish off a team, I imagine he'll get a standing ovation, but will he get a standing ovation in Fenway Park? Neil, go first.
Listen, let's be realistic. Over the course of his career, the Red Sox have basically handled him the best.
That's true. Great point.
will he get a standing ovation? First of all, I'm not anti-Boston, but I think they're knowledgeable enough to know that they're seeing a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right.
And I think that they will applaud him for his career, but I know they're going to be hard to some Red Sox fans, just to give a standing O to Rivera. But, they're good people there, and they're hardcore baseball fans, even though their sellout streak has now ended. But it should be a very, very interesting send-off. I believe every place else, he'll get what he deserves. Listen, fathers are going to tell their sons and daughters, I want you to watch this guy pitch. You're watching a future Hall of Famer, and you can say you've at least seen him. I've had the privilege of seeing him his whole career.
Joe, your thoughts? Will he get a standing no at Fenway?
I think he will. I agree. I think towards the end of the season, the last time they play, maybe second to last time they play, he'll get his due. He's the greatest closer ever. Everyone knows what that means, and even if they can't quite grasp it, like some of those children who need their fathers to tell them, they know what greatest ever means, even if they can't really put it into tangible terms. So I think Boston will definitely recognize him. He'll give a tip of his hat. It'll be like Cal Ripken or one of those guys when you and I were that age, Ari, and got to see his farewell try.
Like when Chano Park grew that pitch, allegedly, cough. But, gentlemen, I'll say this. Something that happened 10 years ago that I don't know if people remember or not, but Roger Clemens, as a Yankee, when he went to Fenway Park, they thought it would be his last game at Fenway in the regular season, gave him a standing ovation. Of course, he then came back in the playoffs at Game 3. Not a lot of standing ovation for him as there was a brawl when he threw at Manny Ramirez's head. But the point is, the Red Sox, if it's a regular season, I think they will give him a standing ovation. Of course, Clemens, that turned out not to be his last year for about 4 or 5 years. But you get the idea. When they thought it was his last year, they gave him a standing ovation. Now, we have not had this opportunity to talk about the Hall of Fame. I know it was months ago, but we didn't do a show around that time. No one got in the Baseball Hall of Fame when they took the voting. I believe that has never happened, to my knowledge. What are your thoughts, Neil, first? I mean, they were trying to make a message. They're not going to let the steroid guys in, but you had a couple of guys on that list. I mean, Craig Biggio has over 3,000 hits. How does he not go to the Hall of Fame? So give us your thoughts about the no-show, no Hall of Famers in last voting. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with you. I think that the writers are making a statement that these stats are fabricated, that they were enhanced, and they will not vote for these people regardless of whether they're proven innocent or found guilty. But the bottom line is, a guy like Biggio, he'll get in, but he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer anyway, in my book. He's a Hall of Famer, but I don't think he's a first ballot guy. To me, just getting 3,000 hits, a lot of it is based on longevity. Don Sutton pitched how many years to get 300 wins?
Right.
The point I'm making is he will get in, but in my book, he's not a true first ballot guy. And I think they took a stand. That's okay. Next year, I believe it'll be different. But this was the year that they decided to take a stand, and that's just what it is. So, they'll move on. It's no big deal. They had to do it. I mean, the question is, would you put in McGuire? Would you put in Sosa? Would you put in Bonds? Would you put in Robbie Alomar? Guys that have been accused of taking steroids.
Joe. Go ahead, Joe. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I will say though, I think the writers, in general, I don't like the way the Baseball Writers Association of America handled the Hall of Fame balloting and voting. I think they're too tough, and really, I think a lot of times we see them being tough just to be tough. So I agree on the steroid stand. I think they had to take it. I do think it'll loosen up. I think there are guys who we know will never get in. Rafael Palmeiro.
Yeah, never.
He'll never get in. He has the numbers, but with the way he came off looking
the finger
in the
wag.
congressional
It's the first thing I think
hearing,
of.
yeah, I mean, he has no shot. But I think these other guys will be in. Barry Bonds would have been one of the greatest ever without steroids. Mark McGwire, as a rookie, when he set the rookie record, hit 49 homers as a rookie without juicing. They say that was pre-juicing. That was when he was still skinny. I mean, there's no way to know, obviously, but that was when he was still skinny. He was just coming up. So, again, no way to know. But, I mean, some of these guys, Clemens, incredible pitcher.
3 Cy Youngs before steroids.
A-Rod also. Now, we do know that he juiced early with Texas, but look at what he did in Seattle. So these guys, now A-Rod will have a much harder time because of all this stuff and people hate him and all of that. But I think I agree these guys will get in, but I would like to see the writers loosen it a little bit and not give, 0.5% of a vote to a guy who had a great career. I mean, okay, so he's not going to get in the Hall of Fame. Give him 30% and let him have some dignity, recognize his career. For some of these non-steroid guys who were great players, just not Hall of Famers.
Well, let's also look at one other thing. I mean, a guy like Clemens was 8th in the voting. He only had 37%. A guy like Biggio had 68%. But a guy that I believe should be in there is Jack Morris. He was, by far, the biggest money pitcher of his era.
Yeah, that's right.
Time. I mean, if we're going to look at his era, this guy was, there wasn't a playoff game you didn't want him on the mound with either Minnesota or Detroit. He had a decent whip of 1.3. What about a guy like Piazza?
Yeah, greatest hitting catcher of all time.
No question.
I know there is some skepticism on whether or not he actually took. Or what about a guy like Tim Raines, the second best leadoff hitter there ever was,
next to Ricky Henderson? Right.
So guys are going to get in next year. Of course, I don't know the class coming in, that'll be eligible. But you can even listen, there's going to be a big problem for a guy like Edgar Martinez, who is a career DH hitter.
Never played defense. Right.
But to me, Hall of Fame has to be all-inclusive. You need to be doing everything.
Yeah.
You need to be able, and that's important. That's as far as I'm concerned.
That certainly will hurt him. Also, his career numbers aren't necessarily Hall of Fame numbers. He's around 2,200 hits. They say he's the greatest DH that ever lived. I don't know if the Hall of Fame wants to put that in. This is an argument I heard David Dobin made on this program. He said, problem is steroids were not against baseball rules until 2002. So if I'm a player who took steroids, I would say I didn't break any baseball rules. And for all you know, steroids could have gone against me. I took a risk. It was part of my workout that happened to work. There are guys who take steroids and get injured. Barry Bonds almost ended his career in 1990.
I'm going to stop you on that.
Okay, go ahead.
I've had this discussion a lot with Murray Chess a lot. And you know who he is. He's been on the show before.
For sure.
Murray always said something very, very good. And he doesn't vote for guys that have taken steroids. But what he has said is steroids may not have been illegal in baseball, but they were illegal at the same time under United States law for everybody else. It just wasn't it wasn't in the baseball rules and regulations. So the question is, the fact that it was basically banned for the entire population other than baseball, does that make it right? Now that's his view.
Right.
And so his view is, listen, if it was banned for everybody else and baseball was just lacking getting up to speed, then that's not, then the player really took advantage of a law. He broke a law. Just because he was playing baseball and it wasn't there didn't mean that he didn't break a law or break policy. So, there is some validity to that, and I definitely understand it, and that's why I interrupted you, because I want to make sure that people understand that it was banned, by the government, for all other sports, for college, for high school, but Major League Baseball, unfortunately didn't put it in when the law was passed nationally for everything else.
All right, Joe, your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think also, I think the argument that will end up affecting things more than steroids not being illegal until then in baseball, because I agree everyone knew steroids were illegal everywhere else, and for whatever reason, baseball didn't put it in. I think the argument that will become more pertinent will be the fact that everyone was juicing on both sides. Obviously not every player, but you had pitchers, you had hitters. Since everyone was juicing and it's already recognized as the steroid era, that will relax things, and some of these steroid guys will get in because they all were steroid guys, and they played in the age of steroids. So I think that's going to become the relevant argument, and that's what we're going to see shaping the future voting when we see Clemens get in, when we see Barry Bonds get in, guys who deserve to be in spite of steroids. It's going to come down to, yes, they juiced, but everyone juiced. Let's look at what they did and do it. Clearly, we know 500 homers isn't a Hall of Fame indicator anymore. It was when Eddie Murray did it. He was probably the last pure one to do it, I think, before the steroid era. Since then, now, a lot of these guys I don't think are Hall of Famers who hit 500 homers. So those indicators change because it's a steroid era, but that will be what relaxes it and gets the voters to let some of these guys in ultimately, I think.
By the way, my final understanding about the law before we move on to this season, our predictions, is that steroids in itself were not illegal in the United States because they're a prescription drug, but the possession and sale of steroids without a doctor's prescription, that was where the law was breaking. Because people take steroids if they need something. Usually it's very much like the last thing they try to do, but you got to get it for yourself. You can't get it for someone else. But the legalities on it are very interesting. Let's move on to this season. Before I get our picks, I mean, I got to say, I don't know how the Angels got Josh Hamilton in the middle of that order, Albert Pujols, and Mike Trout. Are we okay with Mike Trout not winning the MVP last year? Did the right guy win it with Miguel Cabrera? I want to go there first. Let's go with Neil. Did the right guy win the MVP last year in the AL?
There's no question. I don't even know how that can even be a point of discussion. All right. I mean, you know, the first Triple Crown winner in how many years?
Like 45 years, I think, something to that
Okay.
effect.
So I mean, that's it. Done, over, not even a question.
Right.
That's why they have Rookie of the Year awards. But Most Valuable Player awards, there's not even a question. I wouldn't even sit in on that discussion.
And you agree with that too, Joe?
I disagree. I go the other way. Not to take anything away from Cabrera. He had an amazing offensive season, but that's what it was. Mike Trout was the best outfielder in the majors, not just at his position, but any of the outfield positions. He was incredible every way. His WAR, which we know is so huge now, wins above replacement, much higher than Cabrera. He helped his team more on every front. So I understand why Cabrera got it, but I was holding out for what I would have liked to have seen was a co-MVP, which there is a precedent for.
It happened at Willie Stargell and Keith Hernandez.
And I think that alone, you know, shows that it can happen. Since we know it can happen, I think a co-MVP would have been great because I agree, Miguel Cabrera and getting the Triple Crown, he was incredible. But Mike Trout had one of the best all-around seasons of all time. And you look
Did he win the Triple Crown?
But Neil,
Most valuable player.
Neil, listen to this though.
Not there without him. Period.
And the Angels aren't the same without Trout. But, Neil, here's what I would say to you. If we pull up the Triple Crown list, multiple people who won the Triple Crown did not win the Most Valuable Player award.
Well, Ted Williams at 41 is the main example, but DiMaggio had a 56-game hitting streak. All right.
No, but there were multiple. If we pull up the list,
Okay,
I think there were 17 and only like and like 6 didn't win. We'd have to look up the numbers. I haven't looked them up since the discussion, but there are multiple Triple Crown winners who didn't win the MVP. So again, I'm not taking anything away from Cabrera. I would have loved to have seen a co-MVP, but I think that Trout, it deserves to be a discussion. I think Trout got hurt because he was a rookie. I think they said he'll have a lot more years to do it. But, you know, there were Triple Crown winners who didn't win the MVP.
I'm going to throw a wrinkle in there because I could feel Neil fuming. One thing, though, about the Triple Crown winner, there was a time in baseball where if someone won an MVP, they could not win an MVP again. That was, I don't know when that occurred exactly. That may have an effect. Well, look, we got to move on, but we'll have to do this time another time because it's a juicy one. I got to get World Series prediction, fellas. The Angels obviously made a huge move with Hamilton. A lot of people think we might see a California World Series, which I know Joe would like. Toronto looks great. They have the former Met Reyes. They made a lot of great moves. That you could say they stole players from Miami, whatever you want to say. Let's go to Neil first. Who is getting in the World Series? Give us both from each league.
Wow, that's a great question. I like Washington and the Nationals.
Wow. Washington Nationals.
I like the Rangers in the American League.
Even though they lose
without Josh Hamilton.
Okay, so they're going to. Is it a type of thing where they want to spite him? They also lost Napoli to the Red Sox, by the way. But is it? Go ahead and elaborate.
Pitching overall is better than the Angels, and I think pitching is going to be the deciding factor for them.
Of course, Rangers made it not last season, but before that, 2 World Series in a row, almost beat by Cardinals in a very exciting Game 6. Many people say the greatest World Series game ever. So Rangers and Nationals is Neil's pick. We have that recorded and on record. So if we'll tease him about that. Joe, your World Series pick.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
There's a lot of good teams this season, I feel like.
There are a lot of good teams, and there are a lot of good teams playing well now that should be playing well at the end of the season. I definitely think the Nationals have a shot. The Braves are going to be there. I think the Giants will be back again. And then in the AL, I really think Toronto's going to put it together. I don't think this is the year for the A's to do it. I think it's still too new, but they're going to be a playoff team again, and they'll have seen Texas all year and the Angels all year. So I think they'll have a shot to put some stuff together. But I would say the one that I feel confident about is the Giants getting back. I think they've gotten better, and Lincecum is on track now. I think they're going to make another World Series run.
Well, I got to tell you, Joe, you got a lot of faith in the Blue Jays, you know, and
last place right now in the AL East.
They are.
I mean, they may improve, but no team is going to win with Jose Reyes.
Wow.
So, you know, good luck on that pick.
That is the thing that makes me feel the least good about the pick, I won't lie, is that Jose Reyes is on the team. But I do think that they're going to put it together. I don't think they're going to win the World Series, but I think they're going to win that division. And it'll take them a while, but I think they turn it on and put it together.
Ari can attest to one thing. I always tell him and his friend Andy, you know, especially when Andy rants and raves about whatever teams he's supporting this week, that play out the season. I'm more than happy to wait and see the end results. Nothing that happens in April really matters, other than winning the games that you have to win.
Well, they used to nickname A-Rod, I think, Mr. April, and they had a name. There was a name. Oh, my God, he's escaped me. He played for a bunch of different teams, the Yankees and the Padres, and finally won a World Series with the Blue Jays. Dave Winfield. David Winfield. They nicknamed him Mr. May. That was a nickname of his. I will say this. With Jose Reyes, all you have to do is tell him that it's the last year of his contract, and then he figures out how to play. That's all you got to do.
Listen, all you got to do is watch him stretch a double into a triple, which he still does better than most people in baseball, but sooner or later he'll pull a hamstring.
Yeah, that's probably what happened, and he'll sit on his nice big contract. All right, before we end this segment, I'm going to make my pick. And what I say this time and time again is that rarely does the best team in baseball win the World Series because the playoff system is not a fair representation of the regular season. If you look, since the wild card, rarely does the team with the best record win. That's why a few years ago I knew the Cardinals were going to beat the Phillies because, not that they were a better team, but the Phillies weren't going to win it because it's just the way it goes. It's like a jinx. I keep thinking in my mind, it's in it over and over and over, so I'm going to do this even though I feel like it's too obvious and it won't happen. But I'm going to pick Dodgers-Angels. I think that next year the Dodgers are going to have the biggest payroll, I think, in the majors. I feel like Magic Johnson is going to do whatever it takes to get to the World Series. Major League Baseball would love to have a big market because last year, no offense, but you had San Francisco and the Tigers. It wasn't as the sexy names as before Yankees, Phillies, Red Sox, and so on. So I think they really want it. That lineup, Hamilton, Trout, and Pujols, that's just a scary thing to think about. I feel like one of them could be in a slump in the postseason. You still have 2 out of 3, or if 2 are in a slump, you have 1 of the 3. So that's what I'm going with. I feel like it's a little too obvious, but I had that gut feeling that'll be Angels and Dodgers. Of course, time will tell. We'll have to wait everything out. New York.
Ari, one injury with Matt Kemp again, and your season is in doubt there.
That's true. That's true, but I feel like he could win the MVP this year. I mean, that's going to be my MVP pick is Kemp to win it. I think if he's healthy, he'll do it. And if he does, then the Dodgers obviously are in great shape to go for a World Series run. Dodgers have not won a World Series since 1988, by the way. Just so you know. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it's been a long, long time. All right, Neil, great stuff as always. Thank you for being on Louis Live, and we'll find out whose predictions are right and whose are not right.
Thanks, Ari. Nice to meet you, Joe. Have a great evening, guys.
You too, Neil. Thanks. Be well.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was New York Neil, who finished second place to me in the pool, although I don't know if he'll admit it or not. He was starting to brag that that it wasn't true. And I was talking about that a New Yorker never lies about sports, so I guess we can believe on that front. We're going to stay here and go to our NHL insider, Daniel Friedman. Before we do, I want you to elaborate a little more about the Giants because if they pull this off, that's 3 out of 4. I feel like, again, I know the World Series champions, but they almost did it under the radar. I don't know how many people picked them to win it last year or 2 years ago when they won it. So how are they doing this under the radar so much? I mean, 2 titles, and they're still not the glory as other teams have.
Definitely. I think part of it is what you mentioned, small market team, even though
San Francisco is a pretty big city. But
exactly. San Francisco is a huge city, but in terms of the sports world, it's just not the same. California is dominated by Southern California mostly, and so I think that's part of it. I also think it sort of talks about speaks to what you were talking about. The Giants weren't the best team either year that they won.
Right.
They had the best pitching. When they won the first time, they had a playoff with the Padres to make the playoffs on the last day of the season.
Right.
So they barely got the playoffs, but I remember speaking to people back home before it and us saying to each other, I don't know if we're going to make the playoffs, but if we do, we can win the World Series. And I think that's part of how it's been under the radar also is those 2 out of the 3. You know, you look at the stats, Bruce Bochy as Giants manager, 8-1 record in the World Series with obviously 2 titles if you go 8-1. But so I think they're under the radar because they weren't the best team and they weren't a favorite, but then they just do it with pitching and had the luck and the magical run, all those intangibles that we always talk about every year that a team needs to win it. It was Scudero last year, in addition to the pitching. But that's why I like them again this year because I think Lincecum comes back on track. Their pitching's even better.
Barry Zito looks good.
Zito looks good. They've got Kane and Posey locked up. They've got all their stars locked up. So I think the pitching's just as good, if not better. Everyone's locked up. And even though the target's always on the back for defending champions, Giants are most comfortable and most ready to do it out of everyone because of the 2 out of 3 that you mentioned and the fact that they've been there and so many of their stars have been there in their early 20s.
course, 2010, as I recall, someone almost lost to the Braves, kind of a play here, play there. And in this season, they were down 2-0 to the Reds and scored in the bottom of the ninth.
Amazing rally, yeah, and I remember watching.
It was due to an error too for the Reds.
I remember watching the panel. It was the normal playoff guys that they have on TBS TNT: Matt Weiner, Dennis Eckersley, Cal Ripken, and David Wells. But Shane Victorino of the Phillies was the player who was sitting on the panel, the current player, and he was saying, he was talking about the Phillies run, and he said, you have to have that on your side, whether it's God, luck, whatever you believe in, whatever you call it, you have to have that on your side to win it. It's not good enough to be the best team and play the best baseball. You have to have that luck on your side. He said, we definitely had it when we won it. Speaking again about the Phillies and the Giants, no question had it this year, like you mentioned, with being down 2-0, the comebacks they pulled. They believed. They borrowed the "we believe" from the Warriors, which was fine because it was all Bay Area, and they wrote it the whole way through.
Very well said. All right, on the line, we're going to switch gears a little bit right now. On the line right now is our NHL insider, Daniel Friedman. Daniel, welcome back to the program. How you doing out there?
Good. Good to be back.
It's very great to have you back, and, of course, we almost did not have an NHL season. We were talking to you a lot through the quote-unquote lockout, and now that ended, and you gave us a lot of valuable information. We certainly appreciate that. Let's first talk about Crosby's injury, because since this kid was 18 years old, he was the face of the NHL. He still, to many people's eyes, is. He has this injury. And for those who don't know the NHL, this would be sort of like if Michael Jordan, when he was young in his career, kept having injuries. He did have an injury his second season, didn't play most of that year, but came back and was injury-free, more or less, for his career. What is the latest status on Sidney Crosby's injury?
Well, he's still recovering. The good news is, first of all, it's not a concussion, not like any of his other injuries, so he's going to be okay. And the other thing is, he's expected, I think, to be back by the playoffs. So it's not a tremendous injury. He just had he had to have a little surgery, and his mouth was large shut for a little bit, and so he just needs to recover. But the recovery isn't about recurring headaches or concussion-like syndromes. It's just about whether he can eat solid foods or not yet. So that's the good news with Crosby. So he should be fine.
The saying is,
I'm not too worried about him.
The saying is that just some guys are injury prone. I mean, that's what it seems like. It seems like, I could be wrong, but hasn't this guy been injured every year of his career and missed a significant amount of time of the season?
Not every year of his career, but
close, right?
The concussions are definitely an issue for a while. The only reason I would say this particular injury is exactly a sign of that is it was kind of a freak play, where a teammate shot a puck and it accidentally hit him in the face. It wasn't like he pulled him, like he aggravated a muscle skating, or some people are just some athletes are just fragile and over the course of the game can just get hurt, and this was just kind of a freak rare play, and it really didn't have to do with his his own body, or really anything that he did in particular, or being fragile or anything like that. So, but yeah, the concussions have been an issue. He's been better ever since.
So obviously, hopefully, he can get more stability in his career. I believe he is mid-20s now. I think 24, 25. So he's got a lot of hockey left if he can avoid the injury bug. And I'm not saying he's doing anything wrong. It's not like he's not training. It's not like he's partying out all night. Sometimes it's freak plays. He plays the game very hard, and these injuries do happen to those guys. Let's talk about where the standings are with these teams. We're about two-thirds away of the season, so we have a pretty good sample size. Pittsburgh's number one in the East, and Chicago number one in the West. And I think the feeling is this lockout is really going to do damage to the NHL, or it could, unless we see a very exciting Stanley Cup playoffs. It would help to have some old-school teams, to have a Boston in there, maybe New York, depending on, Rangers are the 8th seed. I don't know how much it helps the league to have Anaheim at number 2, or I know LA's the defending champions. It's like a hockey town at number 4. So the West might scare Gary Bettman a little more. The East is, I think, more where he wants it. Talk about the idea of having these old-school teams in the postseason where it could maybe draw more ratings and get NHL somewhat back on the map.
Well, I mean, first of all, the idea of the NHL really is desperate for for a high rating, or so that it's not really true because I mean, they have the highest TV ratings and the highest attendance numbers they've had in years as soon as the lockout ended. So they were never really dead. I mean, the response from the fans and from TV viewers was much bigger than I think anyone anticipated, the NHL included. So I think that it's been great, and by no means is the NHL dead in the water. I think as long as the finals are a good show, I think they'll be fine. I don't think it has to be a huge market. I think obviously it's always better when you have, I think for any sport, when you have your big market teams. It's not like Buzz Selig isn't praying for Yankees, Red Sox every year in the playoffs. So it can help any league, but I mean the NHL, you can help. I mean, let's say they are the fourth most popular sport in America, but at the same time, their ratings were strong coming out of the lockout, and they're not exactly dead. So I think I don't think that I wouldn't say that unless they have a real premier showcase down at the final of two major cities, I wouldn't say that would be the only thing I'd say at this point. I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue.
All right, Danny, I want to introduce you to my co-host for tonight's show, Joe Robbins. Take it away, Joe.
Yeah, I think one thing that will help the NHL also, you can always rely on the Canadians.
Right.
So even though ratings haven't been hurting, or maybe I should say, even if they were hurting, which luckily for the NHL they aren't, you look at the teams you've mentioned, 4, 5, and 6 in the East are Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, with Winnipeg knocking on the door at number 9. And then in the West, Vancouver, obviously, being the division leader. So regardless of who else is in it, having Canada in it, I think, always is a good thing and will help with the ratings.
It always helps, but at the same time, you have to understand that in Canadian markets, the fans show up and the ratings are high whether the team is good or not. It's not necessarily like Met fans or some other Arizona fans. The Toronto Maple Leafs fans, Montreal Canadiens fans will pack the building every night whether the team is good or not. Whether that's smart on their part is a different story, but that's been the way it's always gone. Throughout history, that's been the trend. So, but yeah, the Canadian markets are generally strong, that helps. But the thing also is in the American markets, there's been a tremendous response, and the attendance in the American markets is higher than it's been in a long time. And the TV, and just for example, the Islanders TV ratings apparently went up something like 60%. This year from last year, which is incredible. So you just think about things like that. The league is in fairly decent shape.
All right, let's go to my Coyotes. Right now, look at the 9th seed. Obviously, hope they get in. Last year, went to the conference finals, gave the Kings probably their best fight of the entire postseason. Let's start with the Coyotes. Don't be influenced because it's me, but do you think they will get in the postseason? Give us your prediction.
As I told you before the season started, I didn't think they were going to get in.
You're sticking to that.
Knocking on the door, they're 1 point out of the playoffs behind Detroit, but I got to tell you, I don't think they're going to do it. I think the teams are a little ahead of them. Detroit is a stronger team than Phoenix. They have the veteran leadership. They do have more depth than Phoenix does. Minnesota is very strong. St. Louis is very strong. And these are teams that are going to be tough to knock out, out of postseason contention. And I'm not sure that they're going to get out. They're going to be knocked out. I think Phoenix is just missing a little bit.
Let's say it this way. Why is that? How do you go from a season? I mean, we do see it in sports from time to time, but generally there isn't a drop-off of conference finals to not making the postseason. Did they lose someone that I'm not paying attention of? The other teams get better, that much better than the Coyotes. So what happened with the Coyotes in this downfall?
I think you have to look at Anaheim and Minnesota and how those two teams have gotten a lot better. Anaheim was terrible last year, and now all of a sudden, you're looking at them, they're second in the conference. And, they kind of came out of nowhere. In Minnesota also, when they signed Zach Parise and Ryan Suter in the offseason, they got better also. And Phoenix kind of just stood pat and lost some players. And, it doesn't help when you do that. I think some teams around them got a little better. Now that's why they're in playoff contention, and the Coyotes are still on the outside looking in.
All right, let's talk about the city of Glendale. They're going to be accepting bids. Different companies about operating Jobbing.com Arena. That's the arena the Coyotes play in. We knew this whole mess where it looked like they were going to leave. It was pretty much a done deal. They're going to leave, and the last second they get someone to have the team. Now the arena is up for bidding. What is this all about? Is it the naming issue? Does someone want to come in instead of Jobby.com and get it? So give us the latest about this, about Glendale opening up bidding on an arena management contract. Go ahead.
If I recall correctly, the person who was supposed to buy the Coyotes, there was, I think at some point, I think right after the lockout or during the lockout, it came, reports surfaced that he didn't necessarily have the funds to actually go ahead and purchase the Coyotes, and now you have a whole mess here because what was supposed to be a slam dunk, oh, they're going to stay, is not necessarily going to be the case anymore. And I think that they're trying to, get some clarity on this issue. Is there someone who's going to come in, run Jobbing.com Arena and run the Coyotes efficiently, or is this team, or are we just delaying the inevitable? It's just a matter of time before this franchise becomes so unstable that they just have to move. And I think especially the Glendale city officials, the Jobbing.com Arena, what happens to it is has a major impact on how they go about things and on their on the economy there and everything. And I think they'd like to they'd like to understand the situation and figure out what's going on sooner rather than later.
Now, one more question on the NHL before we move to Major League Baseball. You made a lot of predictions before the season started regarding who was going to the NHL Finals, who was winning. Do you want to make any changes to your predictions based on the fact now we have 2/3 of the season in the books, or are you still comfortable with your predictions at this point?
I'm comfortable with half of it because I still think Chicago, as predicted, I think I said that they were going to go to the finals, and I said that as long as their goaltending is sharp, and they're going to be very hard to stop, and that's exactly what happened. They're in first place. They're first place in the Western Conference. They have the most points in the NHL. They've been incredible. So I mean, I'm not going to pick them just because they're in first place. I thought that I think they just have the two roles, and they have the pieces to go win it. They've proven it because they've won Stanley Cup before with almost the same team. So I do think they're going to say. I think the Rangers. It was their. I think they just dropped the ball. And I think at the deadline they made some panic moves. Around the deadline they made some panic moves. And while this team is more suited to the coach that they have, I still think it's not as good as the team they had last year or the team that they could have been this year. I think they just didn't play to their potential. And I think that they kind of dropped the ball a bit. If I had to go with a team to go to the finals in the East, it's really hard to take distinctly a team that's slam dunk. I think the close thing to a slam dunk has to be Pittsburgh, but the teams that they have. But we've said this every year about the Penguins, and they've only won it one of those years. Last year it was a disaster in the first round, and this team has had a knack of underachieving in the playoffs the last couple of years. With the exception, I think it's 2 or 3 years ago they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. But and their defense is very suspect, and their goaltending, Marc-Andre Fleury hasn't been so great in playoffs lately. So that's really not a slam dunk either. But I think the Rangers, unless they really get their game going, I think their status as a threat to win the cup is it's not really there anymore. Their threat level has been lowered dramatically.
I'll tell you this, and I'll say last point on the NHL before we move on. I would love to see a Chicago Blackhawks Boston Bruins Stanley Cup Finals. Chicago won the cup a few years ago.
Great.
Boston won it also a few years ago. Last year was LA, but two old school, 2 members of the original 6, correct? Chicago and Boston, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, the original 6 teams, you have 2 of those, 2 big market teams, a lot of tradition. I think it would help the ratings. And as I said, I think of the 4 sports, the NHL postseason is the most grueling, most difficult to play. You have to have a ton of heart, and it's always entertaining to watch. Let's go to Major League Baseball. We will get your World Series prediction. We made ours over the program.
I just want to make one more comment
Sure.
About the playoffs. So I think if you're the NHL, I think you're rooting desperately for a Penguins Capitals Eastern Conference Finals, and that very well could happen right now. I think it would be great. The Capitals are playing great hockey. They move back into first in their division, and to have that Crosby-Ovechkin matchup, and for who's going to go to the Stanley Cup, I think that would be tremendous. I think as nice as it would be to have Boston, and I think that Penguins to rekindle that Penguins Capitals rivalry and Ovechkin's now tied to the league-leading goal, so he's kind of coming back to that elite status. I think if he takes his team on a huge run, I think that could really bring him back and bring the Capitals back, and I think that would be huge for the NHL. Because they're counting on Ovechkin to be one of these guys that they can market So I think that would be good for them.
Right. I mean, if Crosby is Michael Jordan, Ovechkin's Magic Johnson, if you will. I heard a rumor that Ovechkin is Jewish, but I don't think it's true. Of course, we did have Capital games on Israel Sports Radio a couple years ago, so I do have a certain like for the Capitals nonetheless. Let's go to Major League Baseball. Before we get your World Series predictions, I think it'd be fun if we all gave our MVP predictions in each league. So, Joe, we'll start with you. National American League, who do you like for the MVP?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
That's going to be a tough one to pick.
Yeah, all right.
Obviously, I like Mike Trout in the American League. It's an easy pick, but it's the best one in my opinion. He is just a phenomenal hitter, and he's just really coming to his own. I love him, really, honestly. But in the NL, it's really tough. It's really, really tough. I think Bryce Harper's a good youngster. I think he has a chance to do it.
Really? Wow, okay.
Yeah, and I guess I would go with him right now. I forget, is the pitcher able to win the MVP award? Or?
Sure, definitely. So, pitcher...
I can see, either him or Stratford from the Nationals. If one of them really takes off, I really can see it happen.
All right, Joe, go ahead. Give us your picks.
All right, I'm going to go. So.
I would say if he stays healthy, Matt Kemp. He's a 40-40 player if he's healthy. He's a Triple Crown if he's healthy. We've seen him on pace for both of those, derailed by injuries the last 2 years. So that's a big if. So my backup, I like Posey to repeat it for the Giants.
Wow,
I do, and not just saying it as a Giants fan, unbiasedly. I think he has improved every year, and I think he will continue to improve this year. Led the team in every offensive category but steals last year. Amazing to think of. And that was a good Giants team. So I like Matt Kemp to win it if he can stay healthy. Otherwise, I think Posey's going to do something, but I do think the Nationals have a lot of players who can make some noise. And then in the AL, I like Mike Trout. I wonder if there's going to be a drop-off from last year.
Like a sophomore slump type of thing.
Yeah, and for him, a sophomore slump would still be better than 75% of the league he'd be. But, yeah.
Might not win the MVP that way, though.
Exactly. So I think I'd go to... yeah, that's a tough one. AL, I don't even know if I could pick right now.
So, wait, is your answer no pick? You can't pass. I mean, it's a prediction.
All right, let's see.
Of course, if you're wrong, we'll make fun of you. But I mean, I know it's kind of a rock and a hard place. But yeah,
I'm fine being wrong. I'm just torn between so many people. I'm not worried about being wrong. I just really don't know who to pick. All right, let's do it. Let's go with my dark horse pick, who I said before the season started, Albert Pujols.
Oh, that's very interesting that you did that. Very interesting. Okay, because my turn, I'm going to pick Josh Hamilton. Josh Hamilton was an MVP a few years ago. I'm going to double-check his age, but I believe he's in baseball prime. And he's in a great – or they might pitch around Trout for all we know. And Hamilton could or they could walk Trout, and Hamilton will have people in front of him all the time, this type of thing. Hamilton was born in 1981, so he is 32 years old. He just turned 32 – he'll be 30. He'll be 32 in about a month, May 21st. That's baseball prime. Is 32 years old, not 19 years old. And Hamilton,
he is a little older, though. I agree with you, but because of the drug use
the drinking,
the years he lost, his body will break down faster. So he's probably a couple years older than that, but he's also so much more athletic and a better athlete than so many of these guys. Maybe it evens out.
Plus, he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder because the way Texas treated him. I couldn't believe it. The end of last season, he makes an error and strikes out a lot in the playoff game, and they booed him. I'm like, they're booing a guy who won an MVP for them and took them to 2 World Series, and he really had his feelings hurt by that, and he got booed when he came back. He couldn't believe it. He was trying to make a joke about it. He was talking about how Texas wasn't such a good sports town, and maybe now they're starting to get it together. And he was making fun of it, but I think that hurt his feelings. So I'm looking for a big breakout year. Not that breakout maybe is not the best term because people know who he is. And sadly, had it not been for the drinking, he's probably a Hall of Famer. I mean, he had the tools and everything. Did throw a lot of it away to alcoholism. But I like Hamilton in the AL. And I'm going with Kemp partly because I'm picking the Dodgers to go to the World Series and hoping that he stays healthy. Hopefully he wasn't juicing or anything. I don't know. It's a little freaky why this guy goes up and down with his injuries, but I'm going to go Kemp for the National League. Let's get Daniel, I want to get your World Series pick just so you know. I have the Dodgers and the Angels, and Joe has the Toronto Blue Jays versus his San Francisco Giants. Give us your World Series pick.
Well, I'm actually going to, I have the Angels also from the AL, but I'm actually going to go with a dark horse for the NL. And I don't mean that because it's slam dunk that they're going to get in, and by no means do I think they're the favorites to get in, but I feel like, in my mind, they're a dark horse. I don't think anyone's really talking, they've gotten off to a hot start, and, so maybe to an extent people are talking about them. The Atlanta Braves are a really scrappy team. They're a real solid all-around team. And they're really, if you think about it, especially even within their own division, the team that's in second place then, and then the Phillies, who are, are a disaster but still all the big games. Both those teams, and even the Mets, just because, while they are a circus, they do get more attention. The teams that are below them are getting more attention than they are, and they're, just ripping it up. They're 8-1. And the Braves are a really solid all-around team. And I really think they have a chance to win, especially as much as it kills me. I'm a Mets fan, but the Braves are a really good team, are a really solid team here.
All right, so you like Braves and Angels, so that's a great dark horse team, and I would like to go out on a limb. As I said, I don't think the best team wins the World Series, but I've just been moved. For weeks, I was thinking Angels, Dodgers, so I want to stick with that. Let's get Cy Young predictions. I'll go first just for the heck of it. I'm going to I think with the Rangers pitching, a lot of times they say hitting's contagious, and I believe the same with pitching. When you have a good staff, I think it helps everybody else for whatever reason. So I like Darvish from the Rangers. Darvish has been the league in strikeouts for a while. It's got a name out there. A lot of people like the Rangers to do some things. So I know he doesn't have Napoli there, and Napoli calls a great game, but I like Darvish to win the Cy Young in the AL. I know Justin Verlander signed the biggest contract in history for a pitcher.
But that doesn't guarantee success.
He's going to have a great season, but something about it, I don't see him winning the Cy Young again for this year, so I feel like Darvish for the AL. For the NL, I'm going to go with Clayton Kershaw because Kershaw's had some great years. He had a great year a couple years ago when the Dodgers were terrible, didn't get any run support, had terrible fielding, and was still up there in wins, ERA, strikeouts. And again, I think the Dodgers will do something, so I like Clayton Kershaw. Daniel, let's go to you. Cy Young winners, NL and the AL.
All right. Well, for the AL, I also have to agree with Darvish, although I think Brett Anderson of the A's has a chance. Someone give him a run for his money, and there are a bunch of other good players, good pitchers like Shields and some other guys. But in the NL, I would love to. I don't think he's going to win, but I would love to see Matt Harvey win it. I think he's growing up right before our eyes, and he's so exciting to watch. I think he was throwing something like he was throwing something like 98, still throwing something like 98 miles an hour in the started inning in the game the other night. And he was just striking out batter after they were just going down like flies. I mean, this kid is something special. And yes, he plays for a team that's not going to win that many games, but that he's able to kind of take control of games by himself sometimes, and I think he can get the wins. I really think that he can be a strong contender for the Cy Young in the NL. All
right, and Joe, giddy up, your predictions.
I'm going to go with Steven Strasburg. I think Clayton Kershaw, if I had to pick the best pitcher in the NL right now, overall talent, everything, I would go with Kershaw. But I think Strasburg, he's ready. He's still pissed that they sat him down.
Yep, he is.
Gio Gonzalez was second last year in the Cy Young voting. Strasburg's a better pitcher than Gonzalez, and that's not a knock on Gonzalez at all. I think this is the year that Strasburg does it, although I am worried because I think it's Kershaw's to lose. But I like Strasburg. AL, I really like Yu Darvish also. Always like Felix Hernandez from Seattle.
Sure.
King Felix, he earned that name. But I'm going to go with Verlander for back-to-back. I think he's going to come together. He might be the only bright spot on Detroit. I mean, Anibal Sanchez, they've got some other good pitchers. Fister, no question, they have a good staff, but I think they're going to have a down season, I think, at least compared to last year. But I think Verlander, he's not going to have another MVP season. That's a once in a career for a pitcher. But I think
it's still too early to tell. He could still easily rebound. I mean, he's got the talent to do it.
Oh, I don't mean because of what he's done so far. I just mean I don't think for a pitcher to win MVP, you have to.
It's definitely very tough to repeat.
Yeah, but I do like him to repeat for Cy Young. I think that he.
Well, he won in 2011, just so you know.
Sorry,
two out of
2
3
years ago, right?
Some people thought he should have won last year, but.
Right, and we know what he's capable of. He knows what it takes to win, and I think he'll. I like Verlander and Strasburg.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave you with this last question. Of course, speaking of Justin Verlander, he signed a 7-year, $180 million deal. It's a $22 million option for 2020. Finishes in the top Cy Young voting in 2019. And this is the richest contract for a pitcher in baseball history. What are your thoughts about that? Giving this much money to a guy who's only playing once in 5 days. There are some reasons for it. Obviously, he's 30 years old. Baseball prime is generally 32. I don't know how many years he'll have left. Let's go to Daniel. Do you like the contract for the Tigers? Again, 7 years, $180 million. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, I mean, again, if you think about what Verlander means to the Tigers, and there was really no way he wasn't going to get a huge extension. I think everyone anticipated it. It was just a question of when. It's funny because when you come from a hockey, when you're coming from a hockey perspective, 7 years really doesn't seem like such a bad contract.
Right.
Talk to me when you used to be a baseball guy who gets signed for 12 years and have to deal with that contract for over a decade. It doesn't seem as bad. But I guess in baseball, from a baseball perspective, it's a pretty long contract. But I mean, it's hard to say that he hasn't earned it. I mean, he has. He is arguably been just as important to his team and success as anyone else. I mean, he's definitely one of the best pitchers in baseball, and he deserves to be paid like it. So I think from that perspective, there was no way he wasn't going to get that kind of a contract. And whether it was, from the Tigers or from someone else, if they didn't want to pay it and they wanted to trade him, he was going to get that kind of money. I don't think he didn't really anticipate it. So I wasn't surprised. I think that, I think that if he can live up to the billing, that would be great. That it's unfortunately becoming a rare thing these days in sports is for players to sign a big contract and then live up to those expectations after the contract. I mean, all too often you see they drop off after they sign the deal. So it would be nice, if you can keep it going.
All right.
I like it. I think it was a good move.
And Joe, your thoughts on the contract?
Yeah, he was going to get that money. Detroit had to do it. I think all of the athletes are overpaid.
Right, of course, yeah.
But and not even in a bitter way. I think it's just gotten so out of hand that it keeps going up. It's just too high. But having said that, Verlander was going to get the money. He deserved it. And on the same day that he got the richest contract, for a pitcher in Major League history, the Giants gave Posey the richest contract for a catcher in Major League history. Same thing. They're two of the best at their position in the game. Verlander was going to get it from someone else. Tigers had to do it. Great deal for him, great deal for the team, and I think it's a great deal for baseball. He's a guy who you wanted in a Tigers uniform his entire career.
The way I look at it is, I would say he's probably going to go south after age 35 is what I imagine. So I almost look at it as a 5-year contract of $180 million. Maybe he has a couple of good years, 6, 7, 8 years. And you got to say, you're basically talking about $32, $33 million, but without him, they are not going to the World Series of the postseason, and with him, they probably will go to the postseason. And you have to figure out how many dollars is that worth for the team in jersey sales, in postseason money, television revenue. And keep in mind, Verlander, he doesn't just have a good ERA and strikeouts. He pitches a lot of innings, 200-plus innings consistently.
Leads the league almost every year now.
Yeah. And what that does is it gives your bullpen a rest, and he actually has an effect on 3 games. The game before, they know they can use the bullpen because they won't have to use it when Verlander pitches. And then the game after, they have a fresh bullpen. So it has an effect on 3 games. So when you look at it that way, he has an influence on 60% of the games. And for that, you know what? You never know what the market's going to do. In 5 years from now, he could be underpaid. That would be kind of scary. But it's what they had to do to keep him, man. Detroit wants people in the stands, so that's what they had to do. But Daniel, great stuff as always. We appreciate your time on Lewis Live on Israel Sports Radio, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. That was our NHL insider, Daniel Friedman. We're talking about the NHL hockey season at this point, about two-thirds of the way finished. And Crosby suffers from the concussion, so we'll see if he's got time to make a decent run. And a lot of people will look to Alex Ovechkin to kind of carry the torch while Crosby's being injured. Now, you are really you're eating or drinking the giant Kool-Aid. You like the win of the World Series. You like Buster Posey winning the MVP. But if you were not a Giants fan, I know you can't do that, but would you feel the same way?
I really think I would, just for the reasons we spoke about. I think it's about pitching when it comes to the playoffs. The Giants are a playoff team, and the way they come together, I would not want to face them in the playoffs as any team in the NL or as the AL team in the World Series. And the reason that I think Buster Posey as MVP for the same reason is, like you said, with Kemp for the Dodgers. And Kemp, for the record, is my MVP pick, but it's a huge caveat if he stays healthy. So I hope he does, and if he does, I think he will. But, yeah, just the fact that I think the Giants are going to win the division, Posey will be the reason why. And so if you're on the best team in the division, you're the defending champs, and you're the best player, good betting strategy for MVP.
Caveat, I like that, because sports talk is a blue-collar environment, but that's a good word. I like that caveat. Posey, by the way, whatever it's worth about the contract, the year he was injured was the year the Giants didn't win the World Series. I mean, his first year was 2010, so 3 years in the league, 2 World Series, not bad. On the line right now to discuss mostly the NFL draft, some of the moves made in the NFL. We could, if we have some time, a little Oriole talk. The voice of Baltimore sports, who may have one or two thoughts or comments for Joe Robbins, but that would be Deep Voice, Brian Hoffman. Deep Voice, welcome back, baby.
Hey, Ari, Joe, happy spring to y'all.
You know, it doesn't really feel like spring here at night, and Jerusalem's it's kind of cold and it's kind of rainy, but hopefully it's nicer where you're at. Let's just get it out of the way. Go ahead, Deep Voice. Your team won, Joe's team lost, blah, 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 blah. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, but here's a couple of things, Joe, I got to give you credit for still, First of all, you're just talking about Buster Posey. I'll give you credit right there. If you're saying that Matt Kemp's going to be the MVP in the National League, I got to go with you because you were right on Adrian Peterson.
Okay. We both had Adrian. Well, you said that what was your prediction in the final game that we watched in the bar?
My prediction was that the MVP was not going to go the way of a running back because unless a running back broke a major record, basically very little have been the MVP, and that it usually went the way of a quarterback historically.
And Joe, you said that he was getting close to the record, right?
I thought that he was going to break it, but that if he hit 2,000,
he would for sure be the MVP.
He would be MVP regardless.
I think that they made the right decision. Peyton Manning had a great year, but again, 2,000 yards is rare. Also, they do not have a quarterback. Webb? Webb came in. I don't even remember what happened, but the starter they were 31st in passing, so I think it went to the right guy. This is a point, Deep Voice, that I made at the beginning of the program with Joe. I think of the two teams that went to the Super Bowl, the 49ers have a much better chance of getting back. The Ravens kind of lost everyone. Ray Lewis is gone. Ed Reed's with the Texans. They traded Anquan Bolden. What's going on in Ravenland right now with your boys?
I am so happy, Ari, that you asked me that question because I had to take all of my emotions over. I've been basically answering this question to so many people over the last couple months. A lot of people in the national media and even people right here in Baltimore want to completely just wash away the Ravens for the hopes of this season coming up. And what everybody got to do is just calm down and say, and repeat after me, in Ozzy, we trust. That's Ozzie Newsome, the man that has gotten it done
True,
time
it's gotten
after
done.
time. We see in this league that it's not the crazy splashes and the big drops that make a team successful or unsuccessful on every given year. It's a pattern of success in the draft, next man up, people coming in and replacing other guys. Ray Lewis, the impact of Ray Lewis was, obviously, we all agreed the best middle linebacker of all time.
Wait! I didn't say I agree to that. There's Lawrence Taylor, there's Dick Butkus. That's not a slam dunk.
Maybe I was trying there to put some words in your mouth.
In the last 10 years, he's been the best, and of all the murderers out there, he's probably plays football the best. I mean, there's that too.
And I know you love your deer antlers spray, maybe Melky Cabrera is staying away from the deer this year in Toronto there, but in Toronto, hey, as long as they keep stinking up the joint, as an Oriole fan, I'm going to be very happy. I'm going to give you guys, by the way, my top 5 baseball teams, at the maybe the end of this, as far as who I like so far. It's I don't just I got to tell everybody out there, I'm not a one-trick pony.
You're not just a football guy, right?
People on Facebook know I love my Orioles. I mean, I have a passion for football, possibly a little bit more than baseball, but baseball was the voice of Baltimore sports. His first love in this city. The Ravens, remember, we got in 1996.
Right.
And what happened is I lost a respect for the game from a financial level. I think the NFL is so popular, and one of the reasons why it's possibly more popular, more passionate than baseball is because of the economic parity in the game. The fact that all teams are an average of around $10 million or so within each other. And in baseball, you have a situation where if you have one of the best media markets, basically one of the best populations, such as Anaheim, Los Angeles, New York, New England, you're going to have the best baseball team. Now, what kind of system is that? I know that in this country, to the victor goes the spoils. This is a capitalistic society in which the best should get the best, but not necessarily in a system of sports, which is a game within the capitalistic system. That game can be run evenly and fair, and that is what is great about football, and that is what is lacking. The fact that a team like the Marlins goes up against a team like the Anaheim Angels is unbelievable. And these teams may not prove to win the World Series. Because what I love, Joe, about San Francisco is they don't necessarily have all the big money names. But they got the great chemistry. I mean, they just gave Buster the well-deserved new deal there. But and look, I'm not even that outraged as a fan of the Orioles because Peter Angelos is starting to spend money. I think the Orioles are actually one of the more fortunate teams in this economic disparity, where basically the situation is Angelos was pushing for the owner of the Baltimore Orioles was pushing for a team not to be in Washington, D.C. for a very long time. And it worked for a very long time. But eventually the money powers to be, knew that there was going to be a team in D.C. And he got this sweetheart deal where he gets over 50% of the media revenue from the people that are watching the Nationals games on the Nationals channel as part of this Mid-Atlantic sports network called Masson. It's the media channel here in Baltimore, Washington. Angelos gets that, and we're going to start to see the Orioles spending money. They're not going out making big splashes, but they are starting to sign their own. A lot of people were happy they signed Adam Jones to a big deal. Matt Wieters not going to get Buster Posey money, but he might be looking at an extension within the next year or so. Manny Machado, the man that hit the 3-run home run last night to beat the Red Sox. We were looking at losing 4 games in a row. Now we got back to 500. And, it's so early. It's so early to talk about anything. But I was just talking there about the parity of sports. The Orioles are in decent shape. And And basically you have, again, these teams like Anaheim and Los Angeles that are just disproportionate to the rest of the teams in baseball, and it just does not make sense.
Joe, your thoughts on that? You agree, disagree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's how baseball is, unfortunately, and I'm not dismissing it at all. I agree completely. I mean, the Yankees, so many of the big market teams, and coming from smart marketplaces like Baltimore, like the A's. I mean, the A's have one of the smallest payrolls every single year. So I think you really have to give respect to the GMs of those small market teams who are able to put out a good product and a viable product and a playoff team as a product, working within those financial limitations. And on the flip side, I think there is something to be said about the big market teams that make it work. You can't just throw money at players and make it work, we all know. But having said that, I think it's a little bit harder to bring them up through the farm system and make something work when you're a small market team than it is if you have an open checkbook and can go in and sign whoever.
Teams like, I absolutely agree. I mean, teams like Tampa Bay and the Giants have done it without all this big money, and they've been kind of like anomalies in the situation. But can you agree, Joe, that at least having that kind of payroll like Los Angeles and Anaheim has may not necessarily get them a playoff spot, even though it's a lot easier to make the playoffs now with the extra wild card spot. But having all of those players and all of that depth, if one big guy should get on the DL, you still have, a plethora of all other, multi-tens of millions of dollars players. And that depth should at least make you a contender, if nothing else, in the later months for a spot. And that makes it exciting for the fans to at least have that chance. As was proven last year, the Orioles beat out for a wild card spot the Anaheim Angels, who had one of the most amazing teams on paper, no Josh Hamilton yet, but they even got Greinke late in the year. They gave up prospects to get Greinke. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Great point. Excellent point.
Definitely.
All right, Deep Voice, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to get this as a Baltimore guy, and then we'll give our comments as well. But I believe around late August, there's going to be a bit of a clash in that the Ravens will play on Thursday night, as the tradition is, because they're Super Bowl champions. Ooh. And it's the same night as an Orioles game. They're talking about parking, all these problems. They're asking the Orioles to move the game. I don't know if the Orioles want to do that because it wouldn't be fair to their team. What are your thoughts? It is a controversy to talk about this, even though it's months down the line, but they've seen the schedule. So give us your take and thoughts on it.
Your question, I love your questions today, Ari. You're always right on the money, man.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. That's why I do this live.
Because I was passionate about the last question. This question we were passionate about. Ravens fans are trying to start to move on. Because unfortunately, this has to do with money, and it has to do with unfortunate scheduling, and it has to do with people pumping out their chest, on the part of the Major League Baseball Players Union and some of the people in the NFL. And looking at it from a non-bias, there are a lot of people in Baltimore that, hate the Orioles for this. Some people hate the Ravens for saying, oh, we think we can, be the kings and dictate what we're going to have. Look, I was saying from the beginning, that Major League Baseball, when it made its schedule, should have considered a handful of teams that were potential Super Bowl winners, potentially, and built the schedule around that. Would have taken care of this whole situation. Now, what is really the crazy situation that people don't talk about so much is the fact that easily this game could have been moved back to Wednesday, September 5th. However, and we were given a clue by the owner of the New England Patriots, Robert Kraft, that it was probably going to be the Patriots coming to Baltimore in that first game, and that we all know that Robert Kraft is is Jewish, and Rosh Hashanah, the first night of Rosh Hashanah, is on that Wednesday night. And so what we have here is what some people would say is a possible double standard going on, because we're going to have a situation in which, you know, as you've seen the last 2 to 3 years, and this is a little controversial, but as you've seen the last 2-3 years, the NFL has tried to make sort of an appeasement scheduling conflicts on the East Coast. If you remember when the new Meadowlands Stadium in New Jersey for the Jets and the Giants opened up 2-3 years ago, there was a game early in the season that also had a situation where it was going to be moved because of a bigger Jewish holiday. And how interesting is it that Jews make up less than 2% of the population of this country, yet can have such a big effect on the opening Thursday night game. And, you know, at the same time, this would only happen to the fans in Baltimore, because we consider ourselves to be or people consider ourselves to be the
redheaded stepchild
of the East Coast that has a giant chip on our shoulder. And only something like this would happen to us. But some people are saying it could be a good thing. You get that first road game out of the way quick. Then you have that long week of rest still. You get rewarded with that sort of a mini bye there of a week and a half to rest for that second game, which is going to be a home game. And the NFL might give the city of Baltimore a prime time game in that second week, a Sunday nighter or a Monday night football game. And I'm pretty much guessing that the Ravens are probably going to be going to Denver in that first game. But it's so unfortunate. And look, the two stadiums are right next to each other.
That's right.
It's a logistical mess. And permission had to be granted from not only the Baltimore Orioles, but also from the Chicago White Sox. They play a game the day before.
Yeah,
and
second team, right.
They were talking about a 1 o'clock game, and Chicago has to agree. That's going to shorten the situation, you know, out. But what people are saying is, who cares? There's 162 baseball games. You know, Peter Angelos and the Baltimore Orioles organization should do everything they possibly can to make this work. But we all know that there's a lot of big money powers and a lot of big strutting going on, and this might be beyond just the control of the Baltimore Orioles. This could have to do with the Chicago White Sox. This could have to do with the MLB Players Union. They might say, oh, hold on a second, we don't care that Baltimore Ravens won the Super Bowl in football. We're something too, and if we cave in on something like this, who's to say they're not going to come to us a year later and say, oh, can you guys take a plane earlier and get less sleep? And, you know, that sounds ridiculous, but they have every right to say no, unfortunately. And I'm just playing devil's advocate to the situation because it is very tough for Baltimore fans.
All right, now a couple of points to touch on. First, the 2% of the population being Jewish. I remember a few years ago I was in Phoenix, Arizona. I was walking around with the yarmulke, and there was a guy who was intrigued by it, and he was basically, I don't know what to say, like kind of a religious Christian and never really met a Jew before. I don't know. He was talking to me for a while about it, and I explained to him the population of the world is of Jews. The Jewish population in the entire world is 0.25%, and he was stunned by that, and he looked at me and he's like, wow, they sure make a lot of noise. So just something to point out that this is another example of that Deep Voice is right. It's only 2% of the population, but they may alter this game to begin the regular season for Rosh Hashanah. Secondly, in regards to the White Sox having to play an early game, and people might say, well, it's 162 games. It's only one of 162 games. Guess what? Last season there was a one-game playoff. I mean, I know it's part of the situation, but it came down to the end. The Rangers struggled, had to play that one-game playoff, get knocked out. 2 years ago, your Giants get in at the end with a one-game playoff. So you can't just say that that one game doesn't matter, because it clearly does. Time and time again, it will come down to one game. So I do not like that answer at all. Let's switch gears. In the last few minutes we have Deep Voice. There's talk about the Super Bowl being played on Shabbat. They want to talk about moving it to Saturday. Joe, let's go to you. What are the chances of that happening? Talks? Why do they want to do that? And all that good stuff.
I don't think it'll happen. Saturday's prime time, but Super Bowl Sunday is
a
an
tradition.
institution.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's too big to change. It's the same reason why Final Four will always be on Saturday for college basketball, and the championship game will be on Monday night.
Right.
I think there are just some things that we know. It's the way it's done, and Super Bowl Sunday is an institution. Super Bowl Saturday, it'll
Doesn't sound
sound
right.
weird. Yeah, it just doesn't feel right. So I think that we, as observant Jews, don't have to worry about not being able to watch the Super Bowl or figuring out ways to do it. I think it'll always be on Sunday.
And by the way, and also, if they do it next year, that would have to be the worst time. It's in New York. I mean, are they crazy? That is the dumbest time to move the Super Bowl to Shabbat.
Yeah, know your market, know your audience.
Deep Voice, the chances of the Super Bowl going to Shabbat, your thoughts?
I can guarantee it won't happen next year in New York, New Jersey. I will put the Voice of Baltimore Sports will put a lock on that. Just like they appease Robert Kraft, the same thing will go down. I mean, are we talking about a game that could be, on Shabbat? When is the Shabbat start time?
Oh, I'll look that up.
At that point of the year, there's a little light, so that's early.
Well, now the Super Bowl on the East Coast, my recollection, I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think they're going to start at 6:18, something to that effect. And I'll try to get Shabbat times for January. But are you trying to say because most of the game would not be on Shabbat, it won't be such a big deal?
Well, I mean, if you can have a start time of 7, 8 o'clock, would that be all? I mean, as far as, the NFL is a money-hungry machine. It senses, and the Players Association senses also more money as a result of this. Yes, it would be a travesty that the Super Bowl could be moved from Sunday to Saturday, but if they can strategize and foresee a profit margin that makes it a no-brainer for them as far as potential increased money revenue. I don't know how much more, Joe, do you know how much more they would stand to make media-wise?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
On a Saturday night?
What's the advantage of them doing that? I don't understand that at all. Joe, is there any advantage?
I mean, there has to be some monetary thing, maybe
For them to consider it, even.
Yeah, maybe prices go up because Saturday prime time is worth more than Sunday, so they can justify higher prices for ads. The thing that I don't understand, though, well, I mean, I guess the argument would be the way that the whole Sunday is an affair, the whole Saturday would be, and it's fine because Saturday's a day off anyway. So I guess it could work, and maybe it just feels weird because it feels so foreign, but I think that I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking about the international markets also. Hundreds of millions of people watch across the world. If Sunday is a work day in a lot of places, Israel isn't the only place. If Sunday is a work day, then that's a risk also of having it on a Saturday night. Then again, Monday is a work day, but people, I guess, just budget that in.
You're talking because it's such an international watched event.
Right,
Throughout the
hundreds
world.
of millions outside of America. It fell short of the record this year in America, but it set the record globally.
Yeah, and it's something that the NFL counts on. They want to make a global sport out of it. That's the marquee game, obviously, of the year. All right, Deep Voice, the last few minutes we have left with you, you talked about your top 5 teams. Well, let's go to Worlds. You can do the top 5 teams. We want to know your World Series picks. I have Angels, Dodgers. Joe has Toronto Blue Jays, Giants. So give us your top 5 teams, and then who's going to the World Series?
I'm gonna give everybody a power 5 right now. I don't have this in order from 1 to 5. But the 2 teams, I really think the National League is the stronger of the 2 right now. In that league, I have San Francisco. That's for you, Joe. The Nationals and the Braves. possibly with the Braves being the best of those teams right now.
See, Daniel said the same thing. Interesting. Go ahead. Sorry, D-Voice. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, their lineup and their pitching is absolutely sick, as is the Nationals. I mean, we all see what Bryce Harper is starting to do. In the American League, Texas, I like their consistency every year, and the fact that a lot of people were happy the fact that yesterday Nolan Ryan was announced that he would be continuing
as CEO, right?
A strong relationship with the team there. A surprise team here, which I think is the second best team in the American League right now, which is a surprise team who might have one of the best lineups in baseball. And again, it's early, but this is a young, up-and-coming team with a couple of veterans, the Kansas City Royals.
Whoa. It's been years, I think, since anyone, even Kansas City, said they would do anything. Okay, what is the reason for this, Deep Voice Brian?
I wanted to throw a curveball in there, but Billy Butler has always been sick. Perennial all-star. But they got some of these young guys starting to come in. We all know about Hosmer, him coming in. They have they don't have a great pitching staff. But again, we all know that not every time is the team with the biggest money going to take it. But what they have is a great lineup. They're playing in a division which is takeable. Detroit has shown that sometimes it'll only be 500 at the break, and then they seem to take it in the second half. But there's a couple divisions there in the American League East which are up for the taking. The American League East used to be the best division in baseball. And this year, the best division in baseball got to probably be a toss-up to me between the AL West and the NL West.
All right, and last question, World Series, who's getting there?
Right now, I'm going to go Rangers-Braves.
Wow, the Braves are popular tonight. Okay.
Yeah, they're looking good.
Daniel Friedman had the Braves as well. All right, so there you go. Rangers-Braves, and also New York Neal had the Rangers. So you are not alone in that. All right, Rangers-Braves. I have Angels-Dodgers. Joe has Toronto versus San Francisco Giants. D-Voice, pleasure as always. Great to have you back on the program. Enjoy the Orioles season. Enjoy the football draft, and we will be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on. I just wanted to add real quick, this is why the Orioles didn't make a big splash during the offseason. Look what Josh Hamilton is doing right now. Only a big market team that wants to get people in the seats like Anaheim would spend 5 years, $25 million on Josh Hamilton, who has proven that he is done with a substance abuse problem.
But he's my MVP pick.
There you go.
I hope he's not done. I picked him to win the MVP. All right, 32 years old, but as Joe mentioned, older than the 32 because of his alcoholic problems. We will keep an eye on Hamilton, but I wanted to pick someone other than Mike Trout, so I had to do that. All right, Deep.
I do hope he turns it around. I do hope he turns it around. I think those things can be turned around. I do wish him the best, but it's amazing how much guaranteed money that is. And the Orioles were criticized for not making a big splash in the off season on the pitching side, on the hitting side, but they do continue to get better. And that's what we're hoping for right here. And there are going to be free agents that are going to be available. And if the Orioles are right there in the late months, that trading deadline, they might be players because they got a lot of young pitchers and a lot of young hitters that other teams are going to be looking at, so we can stockpile for a possible playoff run this year.
All right, well, we'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun year. I'm pretty confident about that. Deep Voice, thank you so much. Enjoy your sports. We will be in touch.
Joe, Ari, always a pleasure speaking to you guys. Have a good one.
All right, be well.
You too, Deep Voice.
All right. Deep Voice Brian Hoffman here on Lewis Live on Israel Sports Radio, and we're going to change up gears for our final segment. We're going to talk a little boxing, and before we bring in our next guest, Joe, I wanted to ask you, I was thinking, when was the last big fight that's occurred in boxing? We had Bradley versus, why am I missing the name? Bradley beat that upset.
Yes. Who was that? Now I'm blanking on it also.
Mayweather's supposed to fight him. I don't know why this is happening. He's such a great fighter. Marquez, they fought 4 times. Oh, my God. All right, well, we'll get it up in a minute. Pacquiao. I don't know why it happened. Brin-Jonathan Butler, who we're about to bring on, had a great point that in his article for ESPN that those fights didn't happen. He didn't say Mayweather, Pacquiao 1 or 2, 3. So why is that, other than just simply saying boxing is corrupt, but I mean, do we need to have a system like in sports where 2 has to play 1, 3 has to play 2? I mean, why did this happen?
I mean, I think that's a big problem with boxing right now, and one of the reasons boxing is having problems retaining fans, where UFC doesn't have that problem in mixed martial arts, is because the fights happen in other sports. They aren't happening in boxing. Back in the day, especially the heavyweight division, every good fight happened, every great fight. Pac-Man Mayweather at the time would have been the richest fight in history, no question. We all know that.
They would have each gotten $50 million, I heard. So
at least they were saying it could have been up to $100 million for Mayweather with the pay-per-view gate. So I mean, just insane in terms of the money. But people were also saying it could have been one of the best fights of all time in the conversation.
Because styles make fights. Pacquiao's very aggressive, awkward style. Mayweather counterpuncher, but those 2 together
all
would have been something.
Defense, exactly.
A puncher
and the
versus a boxer.
Combination of titles, everything. So not only the richest, but one of the greatest, and that never happened. And now Pacquiao, we spoke about this last year after his last loss, but the question of if he's done, and he's probably not, but he probably shouldn't fight anymore. So that fight's never going to happen. And I think, yeah, that's definitely a big problem and something that boxing needs to face as a sport, is making these fights that people want to see happen. Have Mayweather fight Canelo Alvarez. As some of these fights that we know we aren't going to see, but for the sake of the sport, we need to see, and they need to start happening.
All right, on the line right now to share us more of why this does not occur in boxing, he wrote a great piece for ESPN everybody should check out. The director of Split Decision, Brin-Jonathan Butler. Brin, welcome back to Louis Live.
How you doing?
We're doing great. What is your take of why these fights don't happen? How come we didn't see Mayweather-Pacquiao? Looks like we're never going to see it. Why do these big fights not occur?
Well, the main reason would be the top-ranked feud that's going on with Golden Boy, and the stars trying to protect themselves. I think Mayweather pretty clearly was avoiding that fight as Pacquiao was rolling through opponents, and as he avoided Margarito. And I think it was smart. I mean, he's benefiting for that, and then just the politics of the sport with the feud between Golden Boy and Top Rank, and the feud between Showtime and HBO. It just doesn't make sense to pit your stars against other stars where their marketability goes down the drain, which is exactly what we've seen with Pacquiao as a result of the Marquez knockout.
So, for example, going to Floyd Mayweather, Joe's saying potentially he could have made $100 million for the fight against Pacquiao, but that's a difficult fight. He can make $30 million fighting nobody. He could do that 3 or 4 times easily, so that's the route he chooses. Is that more what you're saying the situation is?
Yeah, I think what Mayweather did is he established that the only metric that was important for him for saying that he was the greatest fighter of his era or of all time was that he was undefeated, which is a convenient one. Given that Pacquiao's lost a couple times dramatically when he was knocked out early in his career. And, Pacquiao was electrifying the sport in a way, I think it was one of the best runs in the history of the sport, what he did for those 6 or 7 fights. And even Mayweather was saying that there's no way he could have done it unless he was using some sort of substance. So if he wasn't, it's testament to I think, his greatness. And regardless, it lit up the sport. I mean, he was the name in the sport, even though I think Mayweather arguably is the better boxer and who I would have favored had they fought.
Of course, when Marquez knocked him out, he was just really focused, right, Bren?
Marquez was, yeah, exactly. He had renewed focus. That's how his body transformed at 39.
And he got a knockout in the 6th round, and he usually doesn't get knockouts against a guy like Pacquiao in the 6th round. But he was just really, really focused. Brin, I want to introduce you to my co-host who's in studio with me tonight, Joe Robbins. Joe, Brin, Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Good to meet you, Brin.
Good to meet you too.
So, Joe, your thoughts on the boxing game and in general, you were talking about why this happens, your theories. I mean, what would you like? How would you and Brin solve this problem? They have these feuds, so how do you solve it?
I think the feud needs to end. I mean, part of it is definitely the TV networks. We've seen the switch now to Showtime for Golden Boy fighters from HBO. But I think it all goes back to Floyd Mayweather is the face of boxing. He is, from the fighter side anyway, he is Money Mayweather. Everyone knows him. He's a pop icon now. And Bob Arum is the face of boxing from the promotional side. Legendary promoter, Hall of Fame. They're like night and day, and they hate each other. So
yeah, they do.
I agree with Brin. I think as long as that feud is there, it's going to be hard to make any headway. And then the other thing is the promotion is monopolized to a large extent by Golden Boy and Top Rank, and rightfully so because they've been doing it and they've gone the fighters. But still, as we know, anytime you have a monopoly, it's hard for anyone to get in. So with those two monopolizing themes, it's going to be hard for other boxers on the come up to try and get in. So I think that is another thing. It's going to be hard for new fighters who are unaffiliated or with smaller promoters to get the shots at guys like Mayweather and the bigger name fighters. Part of that is the normal having to work their way up. Part of that is not being able to work their way up unless they ally with one of the feuding parties, which again means unless the feud is settled, it's going to stay split.
Brin, how would you solve the problem at hand in the world of boxing?
Well, I totally agree with every point he made. I mean, I think something like the model that the UFC done has proven that, you know, fight for fight, they're taking the audience into account as the priority rather than protecting a career like you've seen with Canelo, where you feed a few aging names to somebody and then, you know, steal some of their audience, hopefully. But this has been very good for Floyd to avoid dangerous fights with Paul Williams, Margarito, Pacquiao, etc. But for fans, you know, as I said in that ESPN article, I think of this era, the three major fights that are the most interesting that in terms of captivating the imagination of the boxing public are the three fights that never happened.
Right, that's right.
We should have had a trilogy with those guys. And there should have been several other trilogies that happened, but somebody like Nonito Donaire, it's fascinating that just fighting 4 times in a year against decent competition, I won't say excellent competition, but very decent names, is so unusual. You know, he actively wanted to give his audience the best fights he could and fight them in a dramatic, exciting fashion. And, you know, to have that be the anomaly in the sport says a lot about where the sport is at right now.
Yeah, great point. Because, you know, there have been heavyweight champions that used to fight 3 or 4 times a year as champion. Lennox Lewis fought 3 times in 2000. Pretty good opponents. Michael Grant was a good upcoming contender. He fought Francois Botha, knocked him out in the second round in England. And then he fought David Tua, who was a pretty respected boxer, and that went the distance. Wasn't a very exciting fight. But you see that even a champion not too long ago fought 3 or 4 times, even as heavyweight champion. Let's go to Donaire because he is fighting your guy. I don't know if what's going to happen exactly. It's going to be pretty exciting. Guillermo Rogano versus Donaire. Donaire, many consider top 3 pound for pound. Guillermo's done some great things in the sport, champion, gold medal winner, but this would put him on the world map if he gets this victory. What's Guillermo's mood like? What's training been like? What are the thoughts going into the biggest fight of his career in his life?
Well, the interesting thing was to watch him come into New York City and train for the media. Apparently, the odds immediately shifted dramatically towards his favor. People had no idea of his skill level, and he's just started using weights for the first time under his new coach Pedro Diaz, who has a PhD and definitely is very, very scientific about his training methods. And I've never seen Guillermo look stronger He has always had a phenomenal physique. He's been fighting at 122 pounds now, between 118 and 122 pounds now for, I think 13 years. So this guy has never had an issue with weight, but boy, he looks powerful. And I think he persuaded a lot of the media that was there that if there's one mistake that Donaire makes, and part of what makes him exciting as a champion is that he's a reckless puncher. And it's great to watch, but to be reckless against somebody with the precision of Rigondeaux is very, very dangerous because of the accuracy and the power. And one punch can end this. And I think a lot of the media that I saw, their reaction was, we had no idea he was this good. The footwork was there, the punching, the power, the combination. So he looks as good as he can possibly look for a 32-year-old champion.
Why, I guess you were talking about Donaire wanted to please his fans, want to give him something to show, but why would he take this fight? This seems like a fight where he's got everything to lose and nothing to gain because Rigondeaux doesn't have a huge fan base. He's not very well known. So it seems like Donaire's taking all the risk here. Why would he do that?
I just don't think he had the option to go elsewhere. I don't think that this is a fight that Top Rank wanted to make particularly. I think this was really almost made by Top Rank in the hopes of Golden Boy put forward a very big offer to get Rigondeaux to go over to them. This kept Rigo, and Rigo would only sign that contract with his management if Donaire was sort of dangled before him. And I think they're hoping that he gets knocked out and that Donaire gets some credit, some added credit. I mean, both these guys just have such incredible pedigrees. You have 12 years, I think, on both sides, more or less, of them both being undefeated. This is how you cement a legacy, both with the fans and also with the media. As I say, even though the fans are not as cognizant of Rigondeaux's achievements and just how good he is, I think the media really has come to understand just how good he is. And if Donaire is able to take that understanding and assert dominance, I think it will add another layer of a pretty impressive legacy that's been carved out by Donaire. And conversely, if Rigondeaux is able to cement his legacy with the definitive knockout against somebody who's coming off the knockout of the year and the 2012 ESPN Fighter of the Year in such dramatic fashion, to do it this expeditiously in his 12th fight, we've just never really seen that in the sport, somebody who's ascended that quickly. It would be really fascinating to see where Rigondeaux can really go from here. If there's a rematch with Donaire, if Donaire would want anything to do with him, I can't imagine who would jump at the chance to fight somebody who, as you say, really has no audience and is this dominant this quickly in the sport.
One of the things also I would like to know is Rigondeaux's mental status. We know he's a little different, partly the language barrier, new culture to the United States. Does he seem to understand what's at stake for him, or does he look at it just another fight? So what's his mental capacity like right now going into this fight with Donaire?
He just seemed fiercely focused. Rigondeaux is like I think a Michael Jordan or a Tiger Woods. He is just blindingly a winner. I think like he's just been a winner his entire life in sports. And inside the ring, this is where he feels the safest in the world. I think outside of the ring, he's quite a vulnerable person, given what his background is and how he was acclimated and indoctrinated into the Cuban system. But in the ring, I don't think for a split second since he began boxing when he was 13 years old, he's considered that he's not the greatest boxer who's ever been born. And so that's what I see. This is very much the reason, this opportunity is the reason he was willing to risk never seeing his family again, never being able to go home. He wanted a chance to prove to the world, a world that doesn't really regard Olympic medals so much anymore. It certainly doesn't have the place in society that it once did. That he could make somebody like Donaire look decisively inferior to Rigondeaux's skill set, and I think that's what he's there to do, is to make a statement of that. And And I hope that he chooses to make it by taking some risks offensively so that you have a decisive knockout. But there's the potential this could be a chess match. And, he'll fight the way he's fought as an amateur and maybe stink out the arena. And Donaire will be afraid to engage and be reckless for fear that, he could get knocked out bad as well. I don't know that Donaire's ever... I know for a fact that Donaire has never fought anybody like Rigondeaux in terms of speed, footwork, and power. So if that causes Donaire to seize up, this could be a very slow fight.
Yeah, it's so interesting you mentioned Rigondeaux's background and just the way it is that gold medals aren't worth as much anymore as they used to be, and people want the big fights and all of that. And it's interesting because I think about how America always wants the underdog. And the point you made, where does Rigondeaux go from here if he does win? When all of a sudden, after 12 fights, he's no longer the underdog. He's the guy everyone's too afraid to face. You said that Donaire was dangled in his face to keep Rigondeaux on Top Rank. What fight could Top Rank make for him if Donaire refuses to rematch?
I don't think there's anything available. I mean, the way I wrote it up for ESPN is Rigondeaux basically has the same skill set as Mayweather, except he can punch. And, on that basis, I think it's kind of hard with this sort of victory to not put him up there in the top 3 pound for pound. And if he had a couple of more people of the caliber of Donaire, I mean, you're talking about somebody who, in terms of skills alone and talent, maybe is the best fighter in the world right now. He just needs to have an opportunity to demonstrate it against competition, and this is as good as the world has for him right now. But after this, especially pushing 33 in the near future in September, I think his biggest enemy is just the clock, is just getting old.
Now, I want to talk about financially, because this is Israel Sports Radio and, Jewish Power and all this kind of stuff. Financially, what is each fighter making, and what will the gate you expect to be, the pay-per-view sales, and if they win, whoever wins, what money's on the table for their next fight? So tell us all the financial stuff.
Well, Donaire's making a little over $1 million, and Rigondeaux's getting $750,000. Past this, I mean, you'd have to think if Rigondeaux wins big that he would move into 7-figure territory, at least short term. Donaire is definitely consistently making $1 million a fight sort of thing, or close to. Yeah, it's a really big fight for the weight class. Donaire has obviously done more than anybody else in the lower weight classes to entice the general audience to be interested. It's an odd location for the fight to be had, simply because Filipinos predominantly in the United States live on the West Coast. Cubans, really even in Florida, have never been known for supporting their fighters in terms of buying pay-per-view or attending fights, filling out arenas. But Top Rank did announce at the press conference that it's a near sellout. I sniffed around to see if that was an accurate statement, because it's kind of a common thing to say, and then you show up and it's, half full.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I was told it actually is true, that there has been enough interest. Radio City Music Hall is an odd location to have a fight.
Yeah, seriously, right.
It's not very big. I think there's about 6,000 seats that are there. But I mean, it's on the marquee at Madison Square Garden. They're advertising it. HBO is plugging it on ESPN.com, and I think there is some enthusiasm about it. I mean, it's for the other than the Mayweather fight coming up on May 5th. This is a very, very interesting matchup. This is really the people in the know, and myself included, feel this is a real 50-50 fight between two. I mean, I won't say that Rigondeau's at his peak any longer, because I think 32 is pushing it to make that claim. But this is, just on paper, one of the best fights there's been. I mean, I wrote it up as this is your best proxy you'll get to Pacquiao-Mayweather, and I believe that. I think there's the real potential in terms of just talent level and styles to give us some idea of what that fight could have been. And I think that's very exciting.
All right, now, Brin, every time you come on the program, we always want to know what is the latest with Split Decision, with the making of the film, expectations of when it will come out. Give us all the latest on Split Decision.
Well, largely it's going to depend on this fight to some degree. If he wins this, HBO is already asking me to give them some of the footage that I have of Rigondeau's wife and kids. And if this guy wins and he's in the top 5 pound for pound, there's a lot more interest. There's a lot more interested parties who can be well served in trying to back something like a documentary. So the timing is there if this thing goes well to just feel out as Rigondeau's career evolves, on this level, along with Fidel Castro has been filmed lately, looking like there's not too much longer. So I'm still holding out just for the right time to release it, and I think Sundance is going to be the place where it will finally be shown.
Well, it's interesting because it was a few years ago that Rigondeaux got you the money for the film because you bet on him he was going to get a knockout in Ireland. He got that done for you, so we'll see if he gets it done again. I know obviously you're hoping for him to win. I got to get a prediction from you. If you see Rigondeaux winning, you see knockout, decision. If it's a knockout, which round?
I think it would be a knockout in the first 3 rounds.
Wow.
I just don't believe that Donaire. Yeah, I don't think Donaire's faced anybody like this, and I don't think he's going to be able to contend with how quickly, effectively, and powerfully Rigondeaux is going to counter any kind of attempted offense. So I think it will be a knockout in the first 3 rounds by Rigo, or it's going to be a very technical fight where you could see Rigondeaux suffer a terrible, the judges stealing the fight from him, like we saw with Yaroslandi Lara against Paul Williams, where I think he won 10 rounds out of 12
and lost the fight somehow.
There is no vested interest of anybody making money out of boxing to have Rigondeaux win this fight. It should not have happened that Rigondeaux would get a fight like this, given the risks that are involved for Donaire, granted he's getting older, but I just see Rigondeaux having the big advantage. However, before I bet that money 20-1 on Rigondeaux winning the first round in Ireland, I had a dream before the fight that he knocked him out in the first round. I also had a dream before this fight that he lost and was knocked out.
Oh, all right.
But it did happen. So I'm not trying to hedge my bets here. And I think, in my mind, I think that's the way it's going to play out. But I have to confess, there was another one of these weird dreams before it.
All right, well, the fight is Saturday night. Donaire, of course, 2012 Fighter of the Year, and it should be exciting. We hope at least it'll be exciting. We hope Guillermo wins. That would certainly help the film Split Decision, and we kind of taken a special interest in Guillermo after having you on the show for the past 2 years. So good luck to him, and we'll keep an eye on the film when it comes out. Brin, thank you so much for being on Louis Live on Israel Sports Radio, and enjoy the fight Saturday night.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, be well.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, that was Brin-Jonathan Butler. If you want to get a chance to read more, a great article he wrote, Donaire Rigondeaux, because he was talking about how the fact we didn't see Mayweather and Pacquiao, this would probably be the closest thing to it. It is on ESPN Boxing, so you can check that out. Go to Brin-Jonathan Butler's Facebook page. You can find it that way. If you go to ESPN.com and type in boxing, that should come up as well. So good stuff from Brin, and hopefully his footage will be picked up by HBO and be more and more interest in his film after Guillermo wins. And if he wins in the first 3 rounds, that would certainly be spectacular. We've come to the end of the show. Before we do, I want Joe to give a plug for OMG Poetry. So go ahead, Joe.
Thank you very much, Ari. So, yeah, OMG Poetry, the one-man gang, is what I do in my professional life when I'm not here in studio at Israel Sports Radio. You can find the videos at youtube.com/Joseph D. Robbins. That's my YouTube channel, and you can also search One Man Gang Poetry, facebook.com/OMG Poetry, and omgpoetry@gmail.com. So search that anywhere on the web, and you'll find me doing what I do.
And Joe will be in Israel for a few more days before he goes back to the old country, so obviously wish you a great trip the rest of the way, and hopefully you come back very soon, and we can watch more sports and bars and all that kind of good stuff. We are at the end of our program, so I want to thank everybody who came on. We had a fun show, but before we do that, I just want to make some programming announcements of what we're looking to do. I want to tell people plans of Israel Sports Radio, but basically we're going to focus a lot on our YouTube channel. We're going to be having different shows. We will elaborate more and break more news on it later on in the weeks to come on Facebook, so stay tuned for that on my Facebook, on Ari Louis, and Israel Sports Radio's Facebook page as well. Check out all the news, and hopefully, Joe, we expect to be part of those plans. And we expect everyone to tune in on the YouTube channel because we're looking to do a lot of things for it. As far as this particular show, I want to thank all the guests who came on. In the 7 o'clock hour, we had on Andy Gershman, brought up some excellent points regarding college sports, if they're truly student athletes, if they're truly professionals who aren't getting paid, and should they get paid, and we discuss the playoff system comparatively between college basketball and college football as well. New York Neil came on at 8 p.m., and he likes the Rangers versus the Braves, correct?
Yeah.
Which was kind of shocked me, but other people had that pick as well. He likes the Rangers pitching staff and feels very comfortable with that. He says as long as Reyes not going to do anything with the Blue Jays, is his opinion, even though Joe has the Blue Jays winning, going to the World Series. 8:30, our NHL insider Daniel Friedman, who says that Crosby has suffered from a concussion and will come back to form, hopefully, but Alex Ovechkin could be the star of the NHL at this point. 9 p.m., we had on Deep Voice Brian Hoffman, still glowing from his Ravens victory, talked about the Jewish power in the United States, only 2% of the population, but nevertheless, the game may be moved or two for Rosh Hashanah. And, of course, we ended the show with Brin-Jonathan Butler, who has the film Split Decision, the story of Guillermo Rigondeaux, who will be fighting in the fight of his life against Donaire this Saturday night, and it will be a very exciting fight. We hope Guillermo pulls it off. Again, as I mentioned, stay tuned for future shows through our Facebook page and future announcements about everything going on with our YouTube channel. But that's it for tonight. God bless, and good night.